She woke up a duchess. By noon, she was nothing. Elara Whitlock's wedding night should have been the beginning of everything. Instead, it became the end. Her husband, Duke Ronan Ashvale, the man who whispered promises in the dark just hours before, stood in the morning light with forged letters in his fist and disgust in his eyes. Betrayal. Conspiracy. Gold digger. The accusations came like knives, each one sharper than the last. Exiled before breakfast. Ruined before the ink dried on the marriage register. But Elara Whitlock didn't break. She got angry. Stay with me until the end. Like this video and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The ceiling above Elara's head was unfamiliar. Not unpleasant, just wrong. The plasterwork was too ornate, the bed too large, the silence too thick. She blinked against the gray morning light filtering through heavy velvet curtains and tried to remember where she was. Then it hit her. Ashvale Manor. The Duke's estate. Her husband's house. Her husband. The word felt strange, even in her thoughts, like trying on shoes that didn't quite fit. She turned her head slowly, almost afraid of what she'd find. And there he was. Ronan Ashvale, Duke of Thornfield, asleep on his side facing away from her. His dark hair was messed across the pillow, his shoulders broad and still beneath the sheets. They'd been married less than 12 hours. Elara's chest tightened with something between wonder and terror. Yesterday she'd been nobody. Miss Elara Whitlock, eldest daughter of a minor gentry family with more debts than prospects. Her father had died 2 years ago, leaving behind a crumbling estate and a brother who gambled like money grew on trees. Her mother's people had cut them off completely after some ancient scandal Elara never fully understood. And then Ronan had appeared. She still didn't quite believe it. A duke. A real duke, not some aging lord looking for a broodmare or a gambler needing to marry money. Ronan was 32, wealthy beyond imagination, and, despite what society whispered, apparently uninterested in the parade of perfect debutantes thrown at him every season. He'd chosen her instead. It had been a whirlwind. 3 months from introduction to proposal to wedding. Her aunt called it scandalously fast. Her brother called it a miracle. Elara had called it terrifying and exhilarating and impossible, all at once. She studied the back of Ronan's head now, trying to reconcile the man who'd kissed her so carefully last night with the cold, controlled Duke the rest of the world saw. He'd been gentle, nervous even, though he'd tried to hide it. They'd talked for hours in the darkness, his voice low and quiet, telling her about growing up in this enormous house, about the weight of a title he'd never asked for. "I don't want you to be afraid of me," he'd said at one point, his hand finding hers in the dark. "I know what people say, that I'm difficult, demanding. But with you..." He'd stopped, and she'd waited, heart pounding. "With you, I want to be different." Now, in the cold morning light, Elara wondered if she'd dreamed the whole thing. She slipped out of bed as quietly as she could, wrapping herself in the silk dressing gown someone had laid out the night before. The floor was freezing beneath her bare feet. She padded to the window and pulled back the curtain just enough to see outside. The grounds of Ashvale Manor stretched out below like something from a painting. Perfectly manicured lawns, ancient oak trees, a stone bridge over a narrow river that wound through the property. Mist clung to the grass, making everything look soft and unreal. This was hers now, all of it. The thought should have thrilled her. Instead, it felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. "You're awake!" Elara jumped, spinning around. Ronan was sitting up in bed, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. His eyes, gray like storm clouds, tracked over her face with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't." He swung his legs out of bed, reaching for the shirt draped over a nearby chair. "I've been awake for a while." There was something off in his tone, something sharp beneath the words. Elara's stomach twisted, but she forced a smile. "The grounds are beautiful," she offered, gesturing toward the window. "I can't wait to explore them properly." Ronan said nothing. He pulled on his shirt with careful, controlled movements, not looking at her. The silence stretched. "Ronan?" Elara took a tentative step toward him. "Is something wrong?" He laughed then, a short, bitter sound that had nothing to do with humor. "Wrong," he repeated, like the word tasted bad. "That's one way to put it." I don't play innocent. His voice was still quiet, but there was steel underneath now. He finally looked at her, and Elara's breath caught. The warmth from last night was gone. His eyes were flat, cold. It's insulting. I genuinely don't know what you're talking about. These. Ronan picked up something from the bedside table, a bundle of papers tied with string, and threw them at her feet. Those. Elara bent down slowly, her hands shaking. The papers had scattered across the floor. She picked up the nearest one. It was a letter, her brother's handwriting. She'd recognize Thomas's messy scrawl anywhere. The Duke is perfect, rich enough that we'll never worry again. You just need to make him believe it's real. Ice slid down her spine. That's not... She grabbed another page. More letters, some in Thomas's hand, others in... Her own? No, not her handwriting. Close, but wrong. The loops were too round, the crosses on the T's too high. He's falling for it completely. Once the marriage is done, we'll have access to everything. Forgeries? Elara whispered. Her hands were shaking so badly the papers rattled. Ronan, these are forgeries. I never wrote these. I would never... Save it. Ronan was fully dressed now, standing by the door like he couldn't bear to be in the same room with her. Do you have any idea how pathetic this is? I actually thought... He broke off, jaw clenched tight. I didn't write these. Elara's voice cracked. She held up one of the letters with her supposedly own handwriting. Look closely. This isn't how I form my letters. The signature is wrong. Someone is trying to what? Frame you? Ronan's laugh was ugly. How convenient, how perfectly convenient that the evidence of your scheme just happens to be fabricated. It is fabricated, Elara was shouting now, panic clawing up her throat. Where did you even get these? They were delivered this morning, anonymously. Ronan's voice was flat, dead. Along with a detailed account of your family's debts, your brother's gambling problems, and the rather impressive list of lies you apparently told to make yourself seem more suitable. What lies? You said your mother's family was simply distant, not that they disowned your entire line for fraud. You said your father died of a heart condition, not that he drank himself to death while fleeing creditors. Each word was a slap. Elara felt her face burning. Those things are true, she said quietly. But I didn't lie about them. I just didn't offer details you didn't ask for. Semantics. It's not. Her voice broke. Ronan, please, look at me. You know me. You've spent 3 months with me. Do you honestly believe I'm capable of... I don't know what I believe anymore. Ronan's hand was on the door handle. What I know is that I've been made a fool. That my title, my fortune, my entire life has been targeted by a clever scheme, and I fell for it like an idiot. This isn't a scheme. Elara crossed the room, grabbing his arm. He flinched away from her touch like she'd burned him, and the rejection hurt worse than anything he'd said. Someone is setting me up, us. Can't you see that? What I see, Ronan said slowly, deliberately, is a woman who married a duke and got exactly what she wanted. The words hung between them like poison. Elara felt something crack inside her chest. Last night, she whispered, everything you said, was any of it real? For just a second, one single, fragile second, something flickered behind Ronan's eyes, something that looked like pain. Then it was gone. Get out. Elara stared at him. What? Get out of my house, out of my life. I want you gone before noon. You can't... We're married. Legally married. Marriages can be annulled. Ronan's voice was mechanical now, empty. I'm certain a judge will agree that a union based on fraud and deception is grounds for... There was no fraud! Elara was crying now, hot tears streaming down her face, and she hated herself for it. Ronan, please, just listen. I'm done listening. He opened the door. Thomas will escort you off the property. Take whatever belongs to you. Leave everything else. Thomas? You're Thomas? Elara's mind was spinning. Your valet is throwing me out? He's calling for a carriage as we speak. Ronan stepped through the door without looking back. Goodbye, Elara. Don't do this. Elara's voice came out raw, desperate. Please, give me a chance to prove... The door closed in her face. She stood there for a long moment, staring at the dark wood, waiting for it to open again. Waiting for Ronan to come back, to say this was some horrible mistake, some test, something, anything, other than what it appeared to be. The door stayed closed. They gave her 20 minutes. 20 minutes to dress, to pack a single bag with whatever she could fit, to walk down the grand staircase she'd climbed as a bride just hours before. The servants wouldn't look at her. They lined the hallway with their eyes carefully averted, like watching an execution they wanted no part of. Thomas, not Ronan's valet but Ronan himself, stood at the entrance with his arms crossed. He at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "The carriage is waiting," he said quietly. "I didn't do this." Elara stopped in front of him, searching his face for any sign of the man who'd laughed with her at the wedding breakfast, who'd toasted to her happiness. "You have to know I didn't do this." Thomas looked away. "It's not my place to... It's exactly your place." Elara grabbed his sleeve. "You're his cousin, his friend. You've known him his whole life. Does this seem like him? Throwing out his wife without even investigating?" Something flickered in Thomas's expression. Doubt, maybe. But he pulled his arm free. "The carriage," he repeated. "Please?" They drove her to the edge of the property and no further. When Elara asked where she was supposed to go, the driver just shrugged and dumped her bag on the road. "Not my problem, miss." The carriage rattled away, leaving her standing on a country road in her second-best dress with a hastily packed bag and absolutely nowhere to go. The morning was cold, clouds gathering overhead promising rain. Elara stared at the distant roof of Ashvale Manor, barely visible through the trees, and felt something shift inside her. The tears stopped. The shaking stopped. In their place came something harder, sharper, anger. She'd been betrayed, yes, cast out, humiliated, ruined before society had even learned she'd been elevated. Her husband had chosen to believe lies over her word, without even giving her a chance to defend herself. But she wasn't dead. And whoever had done this to her, whoever had forged those letters, fabricated that evidence, destroyed her life before it even began, they'd made a mistake. They'd assumed she would break. Elara Whitlock picked up her bag, turned her back on Ashvale Manor, and started walking. The village of Thornfield was 3 miles away. Elara's feet were blistered and bleeding by the time she reached it, her dress muddy from where she'd slipped on wet grass. Rain had started an hour into her walk, cold, miserable sheets of it that soaked through her cloak and plastered her hair to her face. She must have looked like a ghost when she stumbled into the coaching inn. The innkeeper took one look at her and crossed his arms. "We don't serve beggars." "I'm not a beggar." Elara fumbled in her bag with numb fingers. She'd grabbed what little money she had, coins saved from household allowances over the years. It wasn't much, but it was something. "I need a room, just for tonight, and passage to Cornwall on the next coach." The man's eyes narrowed. "Cornwall? That's 2 days' travel, miss. Cost you more than that handful of pennies." Elara looked at the coins in her palm. He was right. She didn't have enough. "I can work," she said quickly. "I can clean, or cook, or—" "Don't need help." The innkeeper turned away. "There's a church down the road if you need charity." Charity. The word tasted like ash. Elara stood in the doorway, dripping on the clean floor, trying to figure out her next move. She could sell something. Her cloak, maybe, or... Here. She turned. A woman sat at one of the tables, middle-aged, sharp-eyed, dressed in traveling clothes that had seen better days. She held out a small leather purse. "This should cover your coach fare," the woman said, "and a room for tonight." Elara stared at her. "I can't." "Sure you can. Call it a loan if it makes you feel better." The woman's eyes flicked over Elara's face, taking in the tear tracks and mud and exhaustion. "You're running from something, or someone. I know the look." "I don't..." "Spare me the denials, girl. Take the money or don't, but decide fast before I change my mind." Elara took the money. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'll pay you back. I swear I will." The woman waved a hand. "Write me when you're settled. Name's Margaret Cross. I'll be in London most of the year." She pushed a card across the table, plain white, with a London address printed in neat letters. Elara clutched it like a lifeline. The coach to Cornwall left at dawn. Elara spent the night in a tiny room above the inn, staring at the ceiling and trying to understand what had happened. Her mind kept circling back to those letters. Someone had gone to extraordinary trouble to forge her handwriting, to fabricate evidence of a conspiracy that didn't exist. But why? She ran through everyone she knew, everyone who might have reason to hurt her. The list was short. She'd never been important enough to have enemies. Unless a memory surfaced, sharp and clear. 3 weeks before the wedding, at a garden party Ronan had insisted she attend. Elara had been standing by the rose bushes, feeling desperately out of place among all the titled ladies in their perfect dresses, when a woman had approached her. Seraphina Vale, daughter of an earl. Beautiful in that cold, untouchable way that made other women hate her and men stumble over themselves. She'd been one of the debutantes everyone expected Ronan to choose. "So, you're the little nobody who caught the Duke," Seraphina had said, looking Elara up and down like examining a bug. "How terribly unexpected. I don't?" "Of course you don't." Seraphina's smile was all teeth. "You don't understand what you've stumbled into, what you've taken, but you will." At the time, Elara had dismissed it as jealousy. Sour grapes from a woman who'd lost a prize she thought was hers. Now sitting in the dark, she wondered. Seraphina Vale was rich, connected, and ruthless. Everyone knew she collected secrets the way other women collected jewelry. If anyone had the means to forge letters, to fabricate evidence, to destroy someone completely. But that was insane, wasn't it? Going to such lengths just because a man chose someone else? Unless it wasn't about love at all. Unless it was about something bigger. Elara sat up slowly, her heart pounding. Ronan was one of the wealthiest men in England. His estates, his investments, his political connections, marriage to him meant power. Real power. And Seraphina Vale had wanted that power. When Ronan chose Elara instead, Seraphina must have been furious, humiliated. But more than that, she'd been blocked from something she believed she deserved. So she'd removed the obstacle. Elara pressed her hands to her mouth, trying to slow her racing thoughts. It made sense. It made horrible, perfect sense. But she had no proof. Just instinct and a vague memory of a threat in a garden. Not enough. Not nearly enough. But it was a start. Cornwall greeted her with cliffs and wind and the smell of salt. Elara's Aunt Josephine lived in a cottage perched on the edge of the world, literally. The building clung to the cliff face like a barnacle, with narrow windows that rattled in the constant gale and a garden that consisted mostly of rocks and stubborn grass. Josephine herself was equally stubborn. She opened the door wearing trousers, actual trousers, and a man's shirt with the sleeves rolled up. Her gray hair was pulled back in a messy knot, and her hands were stained with what looked like paint. "Elara?" She blinked in surprise. "Good Lord, child, what are you doing here?" Elara's carefully prepared speech evaporated. "I need help." Josephine took one look at her face and pulled her inside. The cottage was chaos. Papers everywhere, half-finished paintings stacked against the walls, books piled on every surface. A large orange cat regarded Elara with supreme disdain from its perch on the kitchen table. "Sit," Josephine ordered, pushing Elara into a chair. "I'll make tea. Then you'll tell me everything." So Elara did. She told her about Ronan, about the whirlwind courtship and the wedding and the terrible morning after, about the forged letters and the exile, about Seraphina Vale and her suspicions. Josephine listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with every sentence. When Elara finally finished, her aunt sat back and lit a cigarette. "Well," she said after a long moment, "that's quite the mess you've landed in." "I know." "And you're certain these letters were forged?" "Positive. I know my own handwriting. And Thomas, my brother Thomas, he's an idiot, but he's not malicious. He'd never actually conspire to trap someone into marriage. Men have done worse for money." Josephine blew out a stream of smoke. "But let's assume you're right. Someone went to considerable effort to destroy you. The question is what you're going to do about it." Elara met her aunt's eyes. "Prove it. Find out who did this. Make them pay." "Revenge?" "Justice." Josephine smiled then, a sharp, fierce expression that reminded Elara exactly why her mother's family had always called Josephine the difficult sister. "Good girl," Josephine said. "When do we start?" "Set." They started immediately. Josephine, it turned out, was not just an eccentric artist living in self-imposed exile. She was also remarkably well-connected. Years ago, before she'd scandalized the family by refusing to marry and running off to Cornwall, she'd been part of London society. She still had friends. More importantly, she had contacts. "Information," she told Elara over dinner that first night, "is currency, and I've been collecting it for 30 years. She wrote letters that very evening. Careful, coded messages to people Elara had never heard of. By the end of the week, responses started arriving. Most were useless. But one, from a lawyer in London named Peter Wright, was gold. "I've heard rumors about Serafina Vale," Wright wrote. "Nothing proven, but whispers about forged documents in her past. A breach of promise suit that mysteriously disappeared. A rival for a different marriage prospect who suddenly withdrew from society after compromising letters surfaced. The pattern is there if you know where to look." Elara read the letter 3 times, her hands shaking. "It's her," she said. "It has to be." "Probably," Josephine agreed, "but probably won't hold up in court. We need proof." "How do we get proof?" Her aunt's smile was dangerous. "We find the forger." Finding a criminal forger turned out to be harder than expected. Josephine's contacts provided names, people who might know people who specialized in creating false documents, but nobody wanted to talk. The underworld of London was built on secrets and silence. Until Elara's brother showed up. Thomas Whitlock appeared on Josephine's doorstep 6 weeks after Elara's arrival, looking like he'd ridden straight from London without stopping. His clothes were rumpled, his face unshaven, and his eyes were wild with something between panic and determination. "Thank God!" he gasped when Elara opened the door. "You're alive." "Why wouldn't I be alive?" "Because," Thomas pushed past her into the cottage, looking around frantically. "We need to talk. Now. Before anyone sees me." "Thomas, what?" "They're saying I did it." He spun to face her, breathing hard. "The letters, the forgeries. Serafina Vale is telling everyone I was the mastermind, that you were just my pawn. She's trying to have me arrested for fraud." Elara felt her stomach drop. "She's covering her tracks." "Yes." Thomas raked his hands through his hair. "And she's doing a damn good job of it. Half of London believes I trapped the Duke into marriage to save myself from debtor's prison. The other half thinks we were working together." "We weren't working at all." Elara grabbed his shoulders. "Thomas, tell me the truth. Did you have anything to do with those letters?" Her brother met her eyes straight on. "No, I swear on Mother's grave. I didn't write them, didn't plan anything, didn't even know about them until after you were already exiled. But Elara," his voice cracked, "nobody believes me. I'm ruined. We're both ruined." Josephine appeared in the doorway, cigarette dangling from her lips. "So, fight back." Thomas jumped. "Who the hell are you?" "Josephine Whitlock. I'm your aunt, and I'm going to help you destroy Serafina Vale." Having Thomas changed everything. He knew things, names, places, details about Serafina's social circle that Elara had never been privy to. More importantly, he was desperate enough to take risks. "I'll go to London," he said. "Find the forger myself if I have to." "That's insane," Elara protested. "You just said she's trying to have you arrested. The moment you show your face, then I'll be careful." Thomas's jaw was set in that stubborn way she recognized from childhood. "I'm not letting her destroy both of us without a fight." "You'll be killed," Josephine said mildly. "Or arrested. Probably both." "So what do you suggest?" Josephine stubbed out her cigarette. "I suggest we be smarter than her." Over the next week, they built a plan. Thomas would return to London, but not as himself. Josephine had a friend, a theatrical costumer, who could make him unrecognizable. He'd become Mr. Brown, a gentleman down on his luck looking for employment in certain, yet questionable circles. Meanwhile, Elara would work from Cornwall, following leads and coordinating information. and Josephine would activate her network of contacts, putting pressure on people who owed her favors. "It's dangerous," Josephine warned. "If Serafina finds out what we're doing—" "Let her find out," Elara said coldly. "I want her to know I'm coming. Okis." The first real break came in October. Thomas, now thoroughly disguised in shabby clothing and a false beard, had spent weeks haunting London's seedier establishments, gaming hells, cheap taverns, places where criminals gathered and money changed hands in dark corners. He'd almost given up when he overheard two men talking in a Southwark pub. But some paid well enough. Letters she wanted. Looked real enough to fool anyone. Thomas had followed them, carefully. Waited until one split off from the other, then made his approach. "Heard you're good with a pen," he'd said casually. The man, wiry, nervous-looking, with ink stains on his fingers, had started to bolt. Thomas had caught his arm, not looking for trouble, looking for work, and willing to pay for an introduction. It had taken 3 more meetings. Money changing hands. Careful questions disguised as professional interest. Finally, the man, Finch, he called himself, had admitted something. "I did a job a few months back. For a lady. High society type. She wanted letters forged. Family correspondence," she said, "for a legal matter." "What kind of letters?" Finch had hesitated. "The kind that could ruin someone." "Did she give you a name?" "No, but I kept one." Finch's smile had been sly. "Insurance, you might say, in case she ever tried to deny our arrangement." Thomas had nearly grabbed him by the throat. "I need to see it." "That'll cost you." "How much?" £50. Thomas didn't have £50. He barely had 5, but he'd lied through his teeth. "Done. Meet me tomorrow with the letter and you'll have your money." Then he'd run straight to the nearest post office and sent an urgent message to Cornwall. Shoot. Elara read Thomas's letter 3 times, her heart pounding. He has proof. One of the original letters before they were copied. "Meet me in London. We can end this." "We don't have £50, she said quietly. Josephine stood at the window looking out at the sea. "No, but I know someone who does." "Who?" Her aunt turned, and there was something fierce in her expression, something Elara had never seen before. "Ronan Ashvale's cousin," Josephine said. "Marcus Ashvale." Elara felt her stomach twist. "Why would he help us?" "Because I saved his sister's life 20 years ago. He owes me." Josephine crossed to her desk, pulling out paper and pen. "And more importantly, he's been suspicious of this whole mess from the beginning." "What? Did you think you were the only one investigating?" Josephine's smile was grim. "Marcus has been quietly digging into Serafina Vale for months. He knows his cousin. He knows Ronan wouldn't throw out his wife without cause. He's been trying to prove the letters were forged since the beginning." "Then why didn't he—" "Because Ronan won't listen. Pride, shame, stubbornness, take your pick. Marcus tried to talk to him, tried to suggest maybe he'd been too hasty. Ronan threw him out of the house." Elara sank into a chair. "He really believes I betrayed him. He believes what he needs to believe to protect himself from being hurt again." Josephine sat across from her. "Men are idiots that way. They'd rather be right than happy." "So what do? We get the proof. We force him to see the truth, and then we make Serafina Vale regret the day she ever heard your name." Marcus Ashvale arrived in Cornwall 3 days later. He was younger than Elara expected, barely 30, with Ronan's gray eyes, but a warmer expression. He looked at Elara like she was a person, not a problem. "I'm sorry," were his first words, "for what my cousin did, for what my family didn't do to stop it." Elara didn't know what to say. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." Marcus pulled out a chair, sitting heavily. "Ronan is not well. He's convinced himself he did the right thing. But I've known him my whole life. He's miserable." "Good," Elara said flatly. Marcus's eyebrows rose. "I'm sorry," Elara said, not sounding sorry at all. "But he threw me out without even giving me a chance to defend myself. He chose to believe lies over me. So forgive me if I'm not particularly concerned about his feelings." Fair enough. Marcus pulled out a leather wallet and counted out 50 pounds in notes. Here, for your forger. Get the proof, and I'll make sure it reaches the right people. What about Ronan? Leave Ronan to me. Marcus stood. Just be ready. When this comes to light, it's going to be ugly. I'm counting on it, Elara said. The trap was set for November 1st. Thomas met Finch in a cramped office near the docks, 50 pounds in hand. Finch produced the letter, a single page in Elara's forged handwriting, complete with notes in the margins about how to make the script more convincing. She was very particular, Finch said, pocketing the money. Wanted it perfect. Even brought me samples of the real handwriting to copy from. How did she get the samples? Finch shrugged. Not my business. But she was nervous, kept looking over her shoulder like someone might catch her. Thomas took the letter carefully. If you're ever asked about this, I'll deny everything. Finch grinned. Professional ethics. Thomas didn't trust him as far as he could throw him, but it didn't matter. They had what they needed. The confession came faster than expected. Marcus took the forged letter straight to a magistrate he trusted, a man who'd known Ronan since childhood and had been deeply uncomfortable with the entire scandal. The magistrate examined the letter, compared it to genuine samples of Elara's writing, and immediately issued a warrant for Serafina Vale's arrest. She was brought in for questioning on November 3rd. At first she denied everything, but when confronted with Finch's testimony, with the physical evidence of the forged letter, with the magistrate's cold, unwavering stare, she cracked. It should have been me, she screamed, all composure gone. I courted Ronan for 3 seasons. I was perfect for him, and he chose that nobody, that penniless, graceless, boring little... Careful, the magistrate said quietly. But Serafina was past careful. She ranted about injustice, about stolen futures, about how Elara Whitlock had ruined everything by simply existing. By the time she was finished, she'd confessed to everything. The forgery, the bribery, the conspiracy, all of it. The magistrate had her arrested on the spot. The news reached Cornwall by messenger on November 5th. Elara read the letter from Marcus with shaking hands, unable to quite believe it was real. It's done. Serafina has confessed to everything. The forgeries, the plot, all of it. She's been charged with fraud and conspiracy. The Duke has been informed. The Duke has been informed. Ronan knew. He knew she'd been telling the truth all along. Elara waited for the vindication to feel good, the triumph, the satisfaction of being proven right. Instead, she just felt tired. What now? Josephine asked gently. Elara looked at her aunt, at Thomas, who'd risked everything to help her, at the cottage that had become a refuge. Now, she said slowly, I decide what I want. And what do you want? Elara thought about Ronan, about the man who'd whispered promises in the dark and then destroyed her with accusations in the light, about the Duke who'd chosen fear over trust. I want him to understand what he did, she said finally. I want him to know that loving someone means believing in them even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. That's not really an answer, Thomas pointed out. No, Elara agreed. But it's a start. Ronan came to Cornwall 6 days later. Elara was in the garden, such as it was, trying to coax some winter vegetables to grow in the rocky soil when she heard the horse. She looked up, and there he was, sitting atop a gray gelding, looking as out of place against the wild Cornish landscape as a diamond in a coal mine. He dismounted slowly, carefully, like he was afraid she'd bolt. Elara. His voice was rough, raw, like he'd been shouting or crying or both. She stood, brushing dirt from her hands, said nothing. Ronan stopped, started again. Marcus told me everything. About Serafina, about the forger, about what you've been doing. Good. I have to. He struggled with the words. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I should have believed you. Should have trusted you. Should have... Yes, Elara interrupted. You should have. Ronan flinched like she'd hit him. You should have given me a chance to defend myself, Elara continued, her voice steady despite the trembling in her chest. You should have investigated before you destroyed my life. You should have loved me enough to at least try. I know. Ronan's eyes were desperate. I know, and I can't. There's no excuse, no justification. I failed you in every possible way. Yes, you did. But I'm here now, and I'm asking, begging, for a chance to make this right. Elara looked at him, really looked. He'd lost weight. There were shadows under his eyes, new lines around his mouth. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in months. Good. I don't know if you can make this right, she said honestly. I don't know if I can forgive what you did, what you chose to believe about me. I'll do anything. Ronan took a step closer. Anything you want, just please. Let me try. Why? The question came out sharp. Why now? Because Serafina confessed? Because you have proof I was telling the truth? Because I've been a coward? Ronan's voice cracked. Because I was so afraid of being hurt, of being used, that I hurt you instead. Because I threw away the best thing that ever happened to me out of fear. And I can't live with that anymore. Elara felt her chest tighten. Proving I was innocent isn't enough, she said quietly. You need to understand why you didn't believe me in the first place. I know why. Ronan's voice dropped. My father married for money. My mother died when I was 8. Every woman my title attracted after that was just hungry. For the estate, the fortune, the power. I learned to see marriage as a transaction, to protect myself by never trusting anyone completely. And then you met me. And then I met you. Ronan's smile was bitter. And you were different, real, honest, and it terrified me. Because if I let myself believe in you, really believe, and you turned out to be like all the others, you'd be destroyed. Yes. So you destroyed me instead. Elara's voice was flat. Preemptively. To protect yourself. Yes. Ronan's eyes were wet now. And I will regret that for the rest of my life. They stood in silence, the wind howling around them, the sea crashing against the cliffs below. I need time, Elara said finally. I need to figure out who I am without you, without the title, the expectations, all of it. I need to know I can survive on my own. How much time? I don't know. She met his eyes. Maybe forever. Ronan's face went white, but he nodded. I understand. Do you? No, he admitted. But I'll respect it, whatever you decide. He turned to leave, and Elara felt something twist in her chest. Fear, panic, loss. Ronan. He stopped. If you want to earn my trust back, what? She said slowly. Then earn it. Not with words, not with apologies. Show me through your actions that you've actually changed, that you can be the man you promised to be. How? Elara thought about it, about what she'd learned in these months of exile, about strength and survival, and the power of building something from nothing. Start by helping people who can't help you back, she said. People who have nothing to offer you, no influence, no money, no social advantage, just people. Do it because it's right, not because it benefits you. Ronan stared at her. That's your test? That's my suggestion. Elara crossed her arms. What you do with it is up to you. He nodded slowly. Then, without another word, he mounted his horse and rode away. Elara watched him disappear over the hill, her heart a confused tangle of anger and hope and grief. Josephine appeared at her elbow. That was either very wise or very stupid. Probably both, Elara admitted. What if he doesn't do it? What if he goes back to London and forgets all about you? Then I'll know I was right not to trust him. Elara turned back to her garden. And I'll build a life anyway. And if he does do it? Elara didn't answer, because honestly, she had no idea. 3 weeks passed before Elara heard anything about Ronan again. The news came through Marcus, who'd taken to writing her weekly letters with updates from London. Most were mundane. Society gossip, political developments, the occasional mention of Serafina's trial preparations. But this letter was different. Your husband has disappeared, Marcus wrote. Or rather, he's left London entirely. No one knows where he's gone. Some say Scotland. Others think he fled to the continent. His steward is managing the estates in his absence, and Ronan left instructions he's not to be disturbed for any reason. Elara read the letter twice, trying to decide how she felt about it. Running away, Josephine observed, reading over her shoulder. Typical. Or maybe he's actually doing what I suggested. Elara folded the letter carefully. Helping people. Somewhere he won't get credit for it. You don't actually believe that. No, Elara admitted, but I want to. She hated that she wanted to. Hated that some stupid, stubborn part of her still cared what Ronan did or didn't do. He'd betrayed her, cast her out, broken her heart and her life without a second thought. She should hate him. Instead, she just felt hollow. Stop thinking about him, Josephine ordered, stubbing out her cigarette. You have bigger problems. Like what? Like the fact that Serafina's family is trying to make this all go away. Elara's head snapped up. What? Josephine tossed another letter across the table, this one from Peter Wright, the London lawyer. Elara grabbed it, her stomach sinking as she read. The Vale family has hired the best legal minds money can buy. They're arguing that Serafina was mentally unwell when she made her confession, that she was coerced. They're trying to have the charges dismissed on grounds of insufficient evidence. But we have evidence. Elara's hands shook with fury. We have Finch's testimony, the forged letter, her own confession, which her lawyers are claiming was given under duress. Josephine's expression was grim. They're also suggesting that Finch is an unreliable witness, a known criminal with every reason to lie for money. This is insane. This is how power works, darling. The Vales are an old family with deep pockets and deeper connections. They're not going to let their daughter hang for something as common as fraud. Elara felt rage building in her chest, hot and sharp and clean. So what do? We find more evidence, something they can't dismiss or explain away. Josephine leaned forward. And we do it fast before the trial collapses completely. How? Finch gave us everything he had. Then we find another forger, or a witness, or someone else Serafina hurt. Josephine's smile was dangerous. Trust me, girl. Someone like her doesn't commit just one crime. She's been doing this for years. We just need to find her other victims. Thomas appeared in the doorway, looking exhausted. He'd been running himself ragged traveling between Cornwall and London, gathering information and dodging Serafina's lawyers who were trying to implicate him as the real mastermind. I might have something, he said, dropping into a chair. A woman. Lady Catherine Monroe. She was engaged to a baron 3 years ago. The engagement broke off suddenly after letters surfaced, suggesting she'd been unfaithful. Elara felt her pulse quicken. Forged letters? That's what her family claimed at the time, but no one believed them. The baron married someone else 6 months later. Who? Thomas's expression went dark. Serafina's cousin, Julia Vale. The pieces clicked into place like a lock tumbling open. She's done this before, Elara breathed. Destroyed someone to make room for her family. We need to talk to Lady Catherine, Josephine said immediately. If she'll testify. She won't. Thomas shook his head. Her family sent her to live with relatives in Scotland after the scandal. They've kept her hidden for years. I doubt they'd let her anywhere near a courtroom. Then we go to Scotland. Elara stood, decision crystallizing. We convince her ourselves. Josephine raised an eyebrow. That's a long journey for a maybe. It's not a maybe. It's a certainty. Elara grabbed her cloak from the hook. Because if Serafina destroyed Lady Catherine's life the same way she destroyed mine, then Catherine deserves the chance to fight back. And if she says no, then we find someone else. Elara's voice was steel. But we don't stop. Not until Serafina pays for every life she's ruined. Thomas and Josephine exchanged glances. Well, Josephine said finally, grinding out her cigarette, I suppose we're going to Scotland. The journey north took 4 brutal days. They traveled by coach and mail, switching at every posting station, eating terrible food and sleeping in worse beds. Elara's back ached, her head pounded, and by the 3rd day she was fairly certain she'd never be clean again. But she didn't complain. Lady Catherine lived in a stone manor house outside Edinburgh, perched on a hillside with views of the grey city below. The place looked like a prison, Elara thought, as their hired carriage rattled up the drive. Beautiful, but isolated. A place to hide someone you'd rather the world forget. The butler who answered the door took one look at them and frowned. Lady Catherine is not receiving visitors. We're not visitors, Elara said firmly. We're survivors, and we need to speak with her about Serafina Vale. The butler's expression flickered, just for a second, with something that looked like recognition, or maybe fear. Wait here, he said, and disappeared inside. They waited in the cold entrance hall for nearly 20 minutes before a woman appeared at the top of the stairs. Lady Catherine Monroe was younger than Elara expected, maybe 25, with dark hair pulled severely back and eyes that looked decades older than her face. She moved carefully, like someone afraid of drawing attention. You mentioned Serafina Vale, she said quietly. Why? Because she destroyed my life the same way she destroyed yours, Elara replied. And I need your help to stop her from doing it to anyone else. Catherine's face went white. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Elara took a step forward. Forged letters, a broken engagement, a scandal that ruined you while she walked away without a scratch. You need to leave, Catherine's voice shook. Now, before my uncle… Before your uncle what? Locks you away even tighter? Elara's anger sharpened. You've been hiding for 3 years, Lady Catherine. How much longer are you going to let her win? I'm not hiding. I'm surviving. I know. I've been doing the same thing. Elara softened her tone. But survival isn't enough anymore. Not when she's about to get away with it. Catherine gripped the banister. Get away with what? Everything. Elara quickly explained about her own situation, about the forged letters and the exile, about Serafina's arrest and her family's attempts to bury the charges. By the time she finished, Catherine was sitting on the stairs, her face buried in her hands. I can't, she whispered. I can't go through it again, the questions, the accusations, the looks. You won't be alone. Elara sat beside her. I'll be there. My brother will be there. We'll stand together. It won't matter. Her family will destroy us anyway. Maybe. Or maybe if enough of us speak up, they won't be able to silence all of us. Elara reached for Catherine's hand. Please, you're the only person who can prove this wasn't an isolated incident, that Serafina has a pattern. Catherine looked at her with those two old eyes. And if I say no? Then I respect your choice and leave you in peace. Elara squeezed her hand gently. But I hope you won't. For a long moment, Catherine said nothing. Then she stood, straightening her shoulders. When do we leave? The trip back to London was faster and infinitely more crowded. Lady Catherine brought her maid and enough luggage to supply a small army. Her uncle tried to stop her, actually stood in front of the carriage demanding she come to her senses. But Catherine just looked at him with flat, dead eyes and said, I should have done this 3 years ago. He didn't follow. On the road, Catherine told them everything. How she'd met Baron Hartley at a ball. How they'd courted properly, respectfully, with both families' blessing. How the wedding date had been set. And then the letters appeared. They looked exactly like my handwriting, Catherine said quietly, staring out the carriage window. Letters to a man I'd never met, saying things I'd never say. Explicit things. Proof that I'd been carrying on an affair. Where did they come from? Anonymous delivery, sent directly to the Baron. Catherine's voice was hollow. He confronted me. I denied everything, but his mother had already seen them. His sister, half the household staff. And no one believed you. Why would they? The evidence was right there in black and white. Catherine's hands twisted in her lap. The Baron broke off the engagement that same day, told me I'd deceived him, that I'd made a fool of him. Elara felt sick. It was her own story, told with different names. When did you realize Serafina was behind it? Not until 6 months later, when I heard the Baron had married Julia Vale. Catherine's smile was bitter. Serafina's cousin. The same cousin who'd been quietly pursuing the Baron for 2 seasons before I came along. You have proof? No, just timing and intuition. Catherine finally looked at Elara. That's why I stayed silent. I knew what she'd done, but I couldn't prove it. And my family was so desperate to avoid more scandal that they just Shipped me off to Scotland and told everyone I'd had a nervous collapse. You didn't collapse. No, Catherine agreed. I just learned to stop fighting. Well, Josephine said from across the carriage, lighting a cigarette despite the confined space. Time to start again. They reached London on a Wednesday, just 3 days before Serafina's trial was scheduled to begin. Marcus met them at his townhouse, looking harried and worried. Thank God you're back. The Vales have been making noise about suing for defamation. They're claiming this entire prosecution is a vendetta orchestrated by... He stopped, seeing Catherine. Lady Catherine Monroe? In the flesh. Catherine's voice was dry. Surprised? Shocked, actually. I thought you'd vanished off the face of the earth. I did. Elara convinced me to resurface. Marcus looked between them, understanding dawning. You're another victim. Apparently. Can you testify? I can tell the truth. Whether anyone believes me is another matter. Marcus ran a hand through his hair. It's better than nothing. We need all the ammunition we can get. The Vales have 3 judges in their pocket, and half the magistrate's court convinced this is all a misunderstanding. What about Finch? Thomas asked. The forger. Disappeared. Probably paid off or threatened into silence. Marcus's expression was grim. Without him, our case is weaker. Catherine's testimony might help, but it's still one person's word against the Vale's reputation, Elara finished. We need more. What we need, Josephine said slowly, is to find out who else Serafina has hurt, because I guarantee Catherine isn't the only one. They spent the next 2 days hunting. Marcus used his connections to pull society gossip from the past decade. Thomas haunted the clubs and gambling halls, listening for rumors. Josephine activated her network of contacts, old friends, former servants, people who knew how to find secrets. And Elara went directly to the source. She showed up at the Vale townhouse on Thursday morning, dressed in her plainest gown, and asked to speak with the staff. The butler tried to turn her away, but Elara had learned a few things about persistence. I'm not leaving, she said calmly. You can call the constable if you like, but that will cause a scene. Or you can let me speak with whoever's willing to talk for 5 minutes. Your choice. The butler hesitated. Then a voice from behind him said, Let her in. A woman stepped into view, middle-aged, gray-haired, with a housekeeper's keyring at her waist and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Mrs. Fletcher, the butler protested. Lord Vale said, Lord Vale isn't here. Mrs. Fletcher looked at Elara. You're the Duchess. The one Lady Serafina tried to destroy. Yes. Then you'd better come in. We have things to discuss. Mrs. Fletcher led Elara to a small sitting room at the back of the house, closed the door, and poured 2 glasses of sherry without asking if Elara wanted any. I've worked for the Vales for 30 years, she said, handing Elara a glass. Watched that girl grow up from a spoiled child into a spoiled woman, and I've watched her ruin people. Elara's heart kicked. How many? That I know of? 4, maybe 5. Mrs. Fletcher sipped her sherry. Lady Catherine was the first I suspected. Then there was Miss Julia Winters, a debutante who suddenly withdrew from society after being accused of theft. She maintained her innocence, but evidence was found in her room. Planted evidence? Almost certainly. Miss Winters was engaged to a marquis at the time. The marquis broke it off. 3 months later, he married Lady Serafina. Elara felt cold. Who else? Mr. Henry Blackwood, a barrister who was prosecuting a case against one of Lord Vale's business partners. Compromising letters appeared, suggesting he was taking bribes. He was disbarred. Killed himself a year later. The glass nearly slipped from Elara's hand. She drove a man to suicide? I can't prove she was behind it, but the timing was convenient. Mrs. Fletcher's voice was hard. And then there's her own sister. Sister? Amelia Vale, youngest daughter, sweet girl, fell in love with a gentleman of modest means. Lord and Lady Vale disapproved, wanted her to marry a duke or earl at minimum. Mrs. Fletcher's expression darkened. Amelia defied them, announced her engagement anyway, 2 weeks later, letters surfaced suggesting her fiancé was already married. Was he? No. But by the time he proved it, Amelia had already called off the engagement. She's been locked in her room on the 3rd floor for the past year. Won't speak to anyone. The family claims she's unwell. Elara felt rage building in her chest. Serafina destroyed her own sister's happiness? Serafina destroys anyone who stands in her way. Family, friends, strangers, it doesn't matter. If you have something she wants, she'll take it. And if you're in her path, she'll remove you. Will you testify to this? In court? Mrs. Fletcher was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. Yes, but not just me. I know 2 other servants who've seen things, and I can get you the name of Miss Winter's family. They might be willing to speak now that someone's actually fighting back. Thank you. Elara stood, setting down her untouched sherry. You're risking your position doing this. I'm 63 years old. I've saved enough to retire comfortably. Mrs. Fletcher's smile was grim. And I've watched that girl hurt too many people. It's time someone stopped her. By Friday evening, they had 5 potential witnesses. Lady Catherine, Mrs. Fletcher, 2 other Vale household servants who'd seen Serafina with the forger, Miss Julia Winter's brother, who was willing to testify about his sister's ruined life, and most damning, Amelia Vale's former lady's maid, who'd been dismissed after suggesting that the letters destroying Amelia's engagement might have been forged. Peter Wright, the lawyer, reviewed everything with a skeptical eye. It's good, he admitted. Better than I expected. But the Vales will fight every inch of this. They'll claim the servants are disgruntled, that Miss Winter's brother is vengeful, that Lady Catherine is mentally unstable. What about Amelia Vale herself? Elara asked. If she testified, she won't. Wright shook his head. Her family has her under lock and key. They'd never allow it. Then we get her out. Everyone turned to stare at Elara. Excuse me? Wright said. We get her out, away from her family, give her a chance to speak freely. Elara looked around the room. She's a victim here too. If she wants to testify against her sister, she should have that right. That's kidnapping, Wright said flatly. It's rescue, Elara corrected. There's a difference. Not in the eyes of the law. Then we do it quietly. We ask her what she wants. If she says no, we leave her alone. If she says yes, we're all arrested for abduction. Thomas looked torn between horror and admiration. Elara, this is insane. So was everything else we've done. Elara met her brother's eyes. And we're running out of time. The trial starts Monday. If we're going to do this, it has to be now. Josephine laughed, a sharp, delighted sound. I like it. Breaking into the Vale townhouse to rescue a prisoner. Very dramatic. This isn't a joke, Wright protested. No, Josephine agreed. It's justice. And sometimes justice requires a little creative interpretation of the law. Marcus, who'd been silent until now, finally spoke. I'm in. You're what? Wright looked at him in disbelief. I'm in. If Miss Amelia wants to escape her family and testify, then we should help her. Marcus's voice was steady. My cousin threw Elara out based on lies. The least I can do is help her expose the person who told them. This is madness, Wright muttered. But he didn't say no. They planned the rescue for Saturday night. Mrs. Fletcher provided crucial information. Amelia's room was on the 3rd floor, facing the back garden. The window was locked but not barred. The night staff was minimal. Lord and Lady Vale would be attending a dinner party and wouldn't return until after midnight. How do we get inside, Thomas asked. Mrs. Fletcher held up a key. I've worked there for 30 years. I know every lock in that house. The plan was simple, which meant it would probably go wrong in spectacular fashion. Mrs. Fletcher would let them in through the servants' entrance. They'd go up the back stairs to Amelia's room, talk to her, explain the situation, give her a choice. If she wanted to leave, they'd take her. If she didn't, they'd walk away. And if someone catches us? Catherine asked nervously. Then we run, Elara said. Very fast. Saturday night came too quickly. They assembled at Marcus's townhouse at 10 o'clock. Elara, Marcus, Thomas, and Josephine. Mrs. Fletcher would meet them at the Vale house. Catherine and Wright would wait at the townhouse, ready to help Amelia if they succeeded. Elara dressed in dark clothes, her heart hammering. This was dangerous, illegal, possibly the stupidest thing she'd ever done. But the image of Amelia Vale, locked in a room by her own family, punished for wanting to choose her own life, wouldn't leave her mind. They took a hired carriage to within 2 blocks of the Vale townhouse, then walked the rest of the way through dark streets. Mrs. Fletcher was waiting in the shadows by the servants' entrance, her face pale but determined. "They left an hour ago," she whispered. "Most of the staff is asleep, but we need to be quiet." They slipped inside like ghosts. The house was dark and silent. Mrs. Fletcher led them through narrow hallways, up steep stairs meant for servants, higher and higher until they reached the 3rd floor. Amelia's door was locked from the outside. Mrs. Fletcher pulled out her keys with shaking hands. It took 3 tries to find the right one. The lock clicked open with a sound that seemed deafening in the silence. Elara pushed the door open slowly. The room beyond was small and plain, more cell than bedroom. A narrow bed, a single chair, a writing desk with no paper or pens. And sitting at the desk, staring at them with wide, terrified eyes, was Amelia Vale. She looked like her sister, same dark hair, same fine features, but where Serafina was polished and perfect, Amelia was hollow. Thin to the point of frailty, with dark circles under her eyes and hands that trembled. "Who?" she started. "We're here to help," Elara said quickly, quietly. "My name is Elara. Your sister destroyed my life the same way she destroyed yours, and I'm fighting back." Amelia stood slowly. "Serafina sent you." "No, your sister is in jail awaiting trial for fraud and forgery. We're here because we think you might want to testify against her." Amelia's face went blank with shock. "Jail?" "She forged letters to destroy my reputation, just like she did to you." Elara took a careful step closer. "And we think she's done it to others. We're gathering witnesses, people willing to stand up and tell the truth about what she's done." "My family will never allow it." "Your family doesn't have to know until it's too late." Elara held out her hand. "Come with us. Tonight. We'll keep you safe. And when the trial starts, you can decide if you want to speak or stay silent. Your choice." Amelia looked at the offered hand like it might bite her. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you help me?" "Because nobody helped me." Elara's voice cracked. "And because your sister needs to be stopped before she ruins anyone else." For a long, terrible moment, Amelia didn't move. Then she reached out and took Elara's hand. "Let's go," she said. They made it 3 blocks before someone started shouting behind them. "Run!" Marcus yelled. They ran. Down dark streets, through alleys, Amelia stumbling in her thin slippers, Elara half dragging her along. Behind them, voices and footsteps. Servants? Constables? Elara didn't look back to find out. Marcus had a second carriage waiting on a side street. They threw themselves inside, and the driver took off at a gallop before the door was even closed. "Where to?" the driver called. "Just drive," Thomas shouted back. They careened through London's streets for 20 minutes before finally slowing to a normal pace. Elara looked at Amelia, who was curled in the corner of the carriage, shaking violently. "You're safe," Elara said gently. "I promise. You're safe now." Amelia looked at her with haunted eyes. "Am I?" Back at Marcus's townhouse, they got Amelia settled in a guest room, with Catherine watching over her. The poor girl looked like she might bolt at any second. "Will she actually testify?" Thomas asked quietly. "I don't know what," Elara admitted, "but at least she has the choice now." "Assuming the Vales don't have us all arrested for kidnapping," Josephine added cheerfully. Wright paced the floor, looking like he might be sick. "This is a disaster. When Lord Vale finds out—" "Lord Vale can go straight to hell," Marcus said flatly. "He locked his own daughter in a room for a year because she fell in love with the wrong man. He doesn't get to complain about her being rescued." A knock at the door made them all freeze. Marcus went to answer it, one hand on the pistol in his coat. But when he opened the door, it wasn't constables or Vale family servants. It was Ronan. He stood in the entrance, dressed in rough working clothes, his face tanned and his hands calloused. He looked nothing like the polished duke who'd thrown Elara out of his house 4 months ago. He looked like he'd been living hard. "Marcus," he said. I heard about the trial, about what Elara's been doing. I came to... He stopped, seeing Elara standing in the hallway behind Marcus. Their eyes met. Elara felt her breath catch. Part of her wanted to throw something at him. Part of her wanted to ask where he'd been, what he'd been doing if he'd actually changed. Part of her, the smallest, stupidest part, wanted to run to him. She did none of those things. You came to what? She asked coldly. Ronan swallowed hard. I came to help. I came to help. The words hung in the air like smoke. Elara stared at Ronan, trying to reconcile the man in front of her with the Duke who'd destroyed her life. His clothes were wrong, worn canvas trousers, a shirt that had seen too many washings, boots caked with actual mud. His hands looked like he'd been doing manual labor. His face was leaner, harder, burned by sun and wind. Help, she repeated flatly. That's rich. Ronan flinched but didn't look away. I know I have no right to ask. No right to even be here, but the trial starts tomorrow and He stopped, jaw working. I need to do something. You've done enough already. Elara turned away, her hands shaking with anger she thought she'd buried. Marcus, get him out of here. Elara, Marcus started. I mean it. I don't want him here. Listen to me. Ronan's voice cracked. Please. Just for 1 minute. Why should I? Because I have information you need. Ronan stepped into the hallway, ignoring Marcus's warning hand. About Serafina. About her family. Things that can help you win. Elara stopped, turned slowly. What kind of information? The kind that proves she's been doing this for years. The kind that shows her family knew and covered it up. Ronan pulled a leather satchel from his shoulder. I've spent the last 3 months tracking down everyone she ever hurt. Every scandal, every ruined life, every convenient disappearance. It's all here. He held out the satchel. Elara didn't take it. Where have you been? Cornwall, at first, then Bristol, Manchester, Edinburgh. Ronan's voice was rough. Following leads, talking to people, working dock jobs and warehouses, so I could get close to workers who might have seen things, heard things. You expect me to believe you've been playing detective for 3 months? I expect you to believe I've been trying to fix what I broke. Ronan set the satchel on the hall table. You told me to help people who couldn't help me back. So I did. I worked alongside fishermen in Cornwall, helped rebuild a church in Bristol that burned down, spent 6 weeks in a Manchester factory talking to workers about their conditions. How noble, Elara said coldly. It wasn't about being noble. It was about understanding what you tried to tell me. Ronan's eyes were desperate. That trust isn't a transaction, that people aren't their circumstances, that I was so busy protecting myself from being used that I couldn't see when someone was actually real. Well, salvo-te-si, and you learned all that working in a factory. I learned it from a 14-year-old boy named Simon who worked 16-hour shifts and still helped his sick mother every night. I learned it from a widow in Bristol who'd lost everything in the fire but spent her days cooking for families even worse off than her. Ronan's voice shook. I learned it from every single person who had nothing to gain from helping me and did it anyway because that's what decent people do. Elara felt something crack in her chest. She wanted to stay angry, wanted to hold on to the rage that had kept her going these past months. But looking at Ronan's face, really looking, she saw something she'd never seen before. Shame. Real, honest shame. What's in the satchel, she asked quietly. Proof. Ronan opened it carefully. Letters from 6 different people Serafina destroyed, testimony from servants who saw her with forgers, financial records showing payments from the Vale family to people who later recanted their stories or disappeared. He pulled out a thick folder. And sworn statements from 3 witnesses who can place Serafina at meetings with criminals 6 months before she targeted you. Marcus grabbed the folder, flipping through it rapidly. His eyes went wide. How did you get all this? Money, time, determination. Ronan looked at Elara, and the name of a very good investigator who knew how to ask the right questions in the right places. Why? The word came out broken. Why go to all this trouble? Because you were right. Ronan's voice dropped. Because I destroyed something precious out of cowardice. And because even if you never forgive me, even if you hate me for the rest of your life, you deserve justice. Josephine appeared in the doorway, cigarette in hand. Well, this just got interesting. Aunt Jo, the Duke brought evidence. We need evidence. Josephine looked at Ronan with sharp, assessing eyes. Question is whether we can trust it. It's real, Ronan said. Every word. I'll testify to how I obtained it if necessary. You destroy your own reputation to help her? Josephine's tone was skeptical. My reputation is already destroyed. I'm the Duke who threw out his innocent wife on their wedding day. Ronan's laugh was bitter. Society thinks I'm either a fool or a monster. Probably both. You are both, Elara said. I know. The simple agreement, no excuses, no justifications, hit harder than any argument could have. Elara looked at the satchel, at the evidence Ronan had spent months gathering, and felt the careful walls she'd built starting to crack. Peter, she called. Come look at this. Wright emerged from the study, took one look at Ronan, and froze. Your Grace. Mister? Wright. Ronan handed him the folder. I believe this might be useful for tomorrow's proceedings. Wright read in silence for several minutes. When he finally looked up, his expression was stunned. Where did you find Samuel Finch? Manchester, working under a different name in a printing shop. Ronan's voice was steady. He was willing to testify once I explained that the Vales had put a price on his head for disappearing. Figured witness protection was better than constantly looking over his shoulder. This changes everything. Wright was still reading, flipping pages frantically. With this testimony combined with what we already have, we might actually win, Marcus finished. Elara felt dizzy. For months she'd been fighting with scraps and determination. Now suddenly they had ammunition, real, documented, undeniable proof. And it had come from Ronan. She didn't know how to feel about that. There's more, Ronan said quietly. He pulled out another smaller folder. Evidence that Lord Vale himself knew what his daughter was doing. He paid off witnesses, made threats, used his political connections to bury investigations. The entire family was complicit, Wright breathed. Not the entire family. Ronan glanced toward the guest room where Amelia was hiding. But enough of them. How do you know about Amelia? Elara's voice sharpened. Because I helped her fiancé find new employment in Scotland. He's the one who told me what happened to her. Ronan met her eyes. I was coming to London to help extract her when I heard you'd already done it. Despite everything, Elara almost smiled. You were planning a rescue too? Great minds, apparently. The moment stretched. Then Thomas cleared his throat awkwardly. So what's the plan? We have all this evidence. Trial starts tomorrow. How do we use it? Wright set down this folder, his lawyer's mind clearly racing. We hit them with everything at once. Finch's testimony about being hired to forge letters, the servants who saw Serafina meeting with him, the financial records proving payment, and then, he paused dramatically, we bring out the other victims. All of them? Catherine appeared in the doorway, looking pale but determined. Every person she hurt? Everyone who's willing to testify. Wright's smile was sharp. We bury the Vales in evidence so overwhelming that no amount of money or influence can make it disappear. They'll fight, Josephine warned. Get vicious. Let them. Elara's voice was steel. I'm done being afraid. They spent the rest of the night preparing. Wright interviewed Amelia, who spoke in a quiet, broken voice about her sister's cruelty. How Serafina had smiled while destroying her engagement. How she'd told Amelia it was for her own good, that the man she loved wasn't worthy of the Vale name. She wasn't even angry, Amelia whispered. Just cold. Like I was a problem she was solving. Will you testify to this? Wright asked gently. Amelia looked at Elara. If she can face her, so can I. Catherine provided additional testimony about her own experience. Marcus compiled a list of every witness they had. Thomas verified financial documents. Josephine wrote letters to influential friends. calling in decades-old favors to ensure the courtroom would be packed with people who couldn't be intimidated or bought. And Ronan sat quietly in the corner, copying documents and running errands, never asking for recognition or thanks. Elara tried to ignore him, failed completely. Around 3 in the morning, she found him alone in the library, writing something by lamplight. He looked up when she entered, eyes tired but alert. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Too much to think about." Elara sat in a chair across from him, silent, stretched. Then, "Thank you for the evidence. It's not enough. It's more than I had yesterday." Ronan set down his pen. "Elara, I need you to understand something. This evidence, this help, it's not about winning you back. I know that's not possible. I destroyed your trust, your reputation, your life. There's no coming back from that. Then why do it? Because you deserve justice. And because I need to be someone worthy of the woman I lost." Ronan's voice cracked. "Even if that means spending the rest of my life knowing I had something perfect and threw it away." Elara felt tears burning behind her eyes. "You're right. You can't win me back with evidence or grand gestures. I know. But," she swallowed hard, "maybe someday you could earn my forgiveness. Not my love, not my trust, just forgiveness. That's more than I deserve. Probably." Elara stood, exhausted. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be brutal." She was halfway to the door when Ronan spoke again. "I love you. I know I have no right to say it. I know it doesn't change anything, but I need you to know." His voice was raw. "I loved you then. I love you now. And I'll love you for the rest of my life, whether you want me to or not." Elara didn't turn around, didn't trust herself to speak. She just kept walking, letting his words follow her into the dark. The courtroom was packed. Elara had never seen so many people crammed into one space. The gallery was standing room only, filled with nobility, journalists, curious onlookers, and most importantly, the people Josephine had called in. Influential lords and ladies who owed her favors, politicians who wanted to be seen supporting justice. Even a few members of parliament there to ensure this trial couldn't be quietly buried. The Vale sat on one side, surrounded by expensive lawyers and grim-faced supporters. Lord Vale looked furious. Lady Vale kept dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, playing the devastated mother. Serafina sat between them, dressed in pale blue like an innocent maiden. She looked calm, confident, like this was all a terrible misunderstanding that would be resolved in her favor. When she saw Elara, her smile was pure poison. Elara smiled back. The judge entered, Lord Justice Harrison, a stern man in his 60s known for being incorruptible, and the room fell silent. "This court is now in session," Harrison said. "The Crown versus Lady Serafina Vale, charged with fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. Mr. Wright, you may present your case." Wright stood, and Elara held her breath. "Your Honor, members of the court, I intend to prove that the accused engaged in a systematic campaign of fraud spanning multiple years and numerous victims, that she forged documents to destroy reputations, ruin lives, and advance her own social position, and that her family aided and abetted these crimes through bribery, intimidation, and obstruction of justice." The Vale lawyers immediately objected. Harrison overruled them. "You'll have your chance to defend," he said dryly. "Let the prosecution make their case." Wright called his first witness. Samuel Finch took the stand looking terrified but determined. He told the court about being hired by a fine lady to forge letters in specific handwriting, about being paid in gold and told to disappear afterward. "And can you identify this lady?" Wright asked. Finch pointed directly at Serafina. "That's her." The Vale lawyers attacked viciously, suggesting Finch was a criminal with no credibility, that he was being paid to lie, that his testimony was worthless. Wright calmly produced financial records showing payments from a Vale family account to a name that Finch had used as an alias. "If he's lying," Wright said mildly, "why were the Vales paying him?" The courtroom erupted in whispers. Next came Mrs. Fletcher, who testified about seeing Serafina meet with suspicious individuals, about finding drafts of forged letters in Serafina's room, about being told by Lady Vale to burn the evidence and never speak of it. "Did you burn the evidence?" Wright asked. Mrs. Fletcher pulled a folded paper from her pocket. No, I kept one letter as insurance. She handed it to Wright, who presented it to the court. It was in Elara's forged handwriting, with notes in Seraphina's hand in the margins. Make the loops smaller. She crosses her T's lower. The courtroom went silent. Seraphina's mask finally cracked. That's not... I never... Silence, Harrison snapped. You'll have your chance to testify. The testimony continued. Servants who'd seen meetings, financial experts who tracked the money, a handwriting analyst who confirmed the forgeries. Then Wright called Catherine Monroe. Catherine walked to the stand with her head high, and Elara felt pride surge in her chest. 3 days ago, this woman had been locked away in Scotland, too afraid to face the world. Now she was staring down the person who'd destroyed her. Lady Catherine, Wright said gently, please tell the court what happened to you 3 years ago. Catherine spoke clearly, her voice only shaking a little. She described the forged letters, the broken engagement, the ruin and exile. And then she looked directly at Seraphina. I know you did this. You wanted the Baron for your cousin, and I was in the way, so you removed me. Lies! Seraphina stood up, her composure completely gone. She's a disgraced woman trying to... Sit down! Harrison's voice cracked like a whip. Another outburst and I'll have you removed. Seraphina sat, shaking with rage. The Vale lawyers tried to discredit Catherine, but Wright was ready. He produced letters from the Baron admitting he'd had doubts about Catherine's guilt. Testimony from Catherine's former maid confirming the letters couldn't possibly be real. And then Wright played his final card. I call Amelia Vale to the stand. The courtroom exploded. Lord Vale shot to his feet. Absolutely not. My daughter is not well enough to... Your daughter is an adult capable of making her own choices, Harrison interrupted. Miss Vale, do you wish to testify? Amelia stood in the gallery where she'd been hiding. She was pale as death, shaking so hard Elara thought she might collapse. But she walked to the stand. Amelia, don't you dare, Lord Vale started. Silence, Harrison ordered, or I'll have you removed from this courtroom. Amelia sat, her hands twisted in her lap. Wright approached carefully, like she was a frightened animal. Miss Vale, can you tell us about your engagement? So Amelia told her story. About falling in love, about her family's disapproval, about forged letters that destroyed her chance at happiness. And who do you believe was behind these letters? Wright asked. Amelia looked at her sister. Tears streamed down her face. Seraphina, she told me she'd done it, said it was for my own good. She's lying, Seraphina screamed. She's mentally ill. She doesn't know what she's... I'm not ill. Amelia's voice rose, suddenly strong. I'm just tired of being silent while you destroy people, while our parents cover for you, while you smile and charm and ruin lives and nobody stops you because we're Vales and Vales don't face consequences. The courtroom was dead silent. I'm done, Amelia said, looking at her parents. I'm done protecting you, done hiding, done pretending this is normal. Lady Vale was openly weeping now. Lord Vale looked like he might have a stroke, and Seraphina looked trapped. Wright returned to his table with a satisfied expression. The prosecution rests, Your Honor. The Vale lawyers tried. They brought character witnesses who swore Seraphina was a saint. They suggested a vast conspiracy against their client. They claimed the evidence was fabricated, the witnesses coached, the entire trial a vendetta, but they couldn't explain the forged letter with Seraphina's handwriting in the margins. They couldn't explain the financial records. They couldn't explain why 6 different people had the same story about being destroyed by forged documents. Harrison called a recess. The court emptied for 20 minutes while the judge reviewed evidence. Elara stood in the hallway, surrounded by their witnesses, feeling strangely numb. We did it, Catherine whispered. Didn't we? I think so, Elara said. Josephine lit a cigarette despite being indoors. Don't celebrate yet. The judge could still rule in her favor. Money buys strange verdicts sometimes. But when they returned to the courtroom, Harrison's face was grim. After reviewing the evidence presented, he said, I find the case against Lady Seraphina Vale to be overwhelming. The forgeries, the conspiracy, the pattern of behavior, all of it points to a calculated campaign of fraud and destruction. Seraphina's face went white. However, Harrison continued, before I deliver my verdict, I will allow the accused to speak in her own defense. The Vale lawyers immediately advised Serafina to remain silent, but she ignored them. She stood, smoothing her skirts, and faced the court. I loved him. Her voice was clear, carrying through the room. I loved Ronan Ashvale. I courted him properly for 3 years. I was perfect for him. Breeding, wealth, connections, everything he needed in a duchess. And he chose her. She pointed at Elara with pure hatred. A nobody. A penniless girl with a gambling brother and a ruined family. She had nothing to offer him. Nothing. So yes, I removed her. The same way I removed every other obstacle that stood between me and what I deserved. The courtroom erupted. The Vale lawyers were shouting at Serafina to stop talking. Lord Vale looked like he might faint, but Serafina kept going, her composure completely shattered. I worked for those marriages. I planned. I strategized. I made myself indispensable. And then some random girl would appear and steal it all with a pretty smile. So I made them disappear. It's not illegal to be smarter than your competition. It's illegal to forge documents, Harrison said coldly. It's illegal to commit fraud. And it's certainly illegal to conspire to destroy innocent people's lives. They weren't innocent. They were thieves, stealing what should have been mine. Enough. Harrison's voice cut through the chaos. Lady Serafina Vale, you have confessed before this court to multiple counts of fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. You have shown no remorse, no understanding of the gravity of your crimes. Therefore, I have no choice but to find you guilty on all charges. The courtroom exploded in noise. Elara felt her knees go weak. They'd won. They'd actually won. Sentencing will be held next week, Harrison continued, raising his voice over the chaos. But given the severity and premeditation of these crimes, the defendant will remain in custody without bail. Guards, remove her. 2 officers moved toward Serafina. She fought them, screaming obscenities, all pretense of gentility gone. It took 3 men to drag her from the courtroom. Lord and Lady Vale sat frozen, their perfect daughter being hauled away in chains. Elara watched it all, feeling strangely detached, like this was happening to someone else, like she was watching a play. Catherine grabbed her hand. We did it. Yeah? Elara whispered. We did. The crowd pressed in, journalists shouting questions, well-wishers offering congratulations, curious onlookers trying to get a glimpse of the woman who'd brought down a veil. Marcus pushed through, Josephine and Thomas behind him. We need to get you out of here before this becomes a mob. They made their way through the crowd to a side exit, but before they could leave, someone called Elara's name. She turned. Ronan stood at the edge of the crowd, not approaching, just watching. When their eyes met, he nodded once, a gesture of acknowledgement, of respect. Elara nodded back. Then Marcus pulled her through the door and out into the street. The celebration at Marcus's townhouse was subdued. Everyone was exhausted, wrung out from months of stress and fear and fighting. Catherine fell asleep on the sofa. Amelia sat curled in a chair, staring at nothing. Thomas drank too much wine and got weepy. Josephine smoked and looked satisfied. You did well, she told Elara. Your mother would be proud. Elara felt tears threatening. I wish she could have seen it. She saw it wherever she is. Josephine patted her hand. Now the question is, what comes next? What do you mean? You've won your justice. Serafina will spend years in prison. Your name is cleared. Society will welcome you back with open arms. Josephine's eyes were shrewd. So what do you want, girl? Really want? Elara thought about it. About Cornwall and the cottage on the cliffs. About the quiet life she'd built in exile. About the strength she'd found when everything was stripped away. I want to go home, she said finally. To Cornwall. I want to... The door burst open. Marcus stumbled in, his face white. We have a problem. What kind of problem? The kind where Lord Vale just tried to have all our witnesses arrested for perjury and conspiracy. Marcus was breathing hard. He's filed complaints with the magistrate, claims we fabricated evidence. He's calling in every favor, using every connection. He's trying to reverse the verdict. He can't do that, Wright protested. The trial is over. The verdict stands. He can make our lives hell trying, and he's threatening to sue everyone who testified for defamation. Marcus looked at Elara. Including you. The triumph of moments ago evaporated, so it's not over. It's never over with people like the Vales. Josephine ground out her cigarette. They'll keep fighting until they have nothing left. Then we make sure they have nothing left. The voice came from the doorway. Ronan stepped inside, still in his rough clothes, looking determined and dangerous. What are you doing here? Marcus demanded. I have one more piece of evidence. Ronan pulled out a final folder. I didn't use it before because I was hoping it wouldn't be necessary. But if Vale wants war... He opened the folder. Inside were bank records, property deeds, and what looked like legal documents. What is this? Wright grabbed the papers. Proof that Lord Vale has been embezzling from his own family's charitable trust for 15 years. That he's been running an illegal gambling operation through his clubs. That he bribed 3 different judges to dismiss cases against him. Ronan's voice was flat, enough to destroy him completely, enough to make sure he never threatens any of you again. Where did you get this? Wright was reading frantically, his eyes growing wider. I bought it, from a very disgruntled former business partner who Vale tried to cheat. Ronan looked at Elara. I told you I'd been investigating. I found things about Serafina, but I also found things about her father. You've been sitting on this? Marcus looked stunned. I wanted to give him a chance to accept the verdict with dignity, to let his daughter face justice without destroying the entire family. Ronan's jaw tightened. But if he's going to come after the people who testified, after Elara, then he loses that chance. This is blackmail, Wright said weakly. This is leverage. Ronan turned to Elara. Your choice. We can sit back and let Vale drag this out for years in courts and lawsuits, or we can end it now. Elara looked at the documents, at the proof of Vale's crimes, at the weapon Ronan was offering her. If we use this, we're no better than they are, she said slowly. Maybe. Or maybe we're just survivors doing what's necessary to protect ourselves. Elara. Catherine's voice was quiet. He'll never stop, not unless we make him. Amelia nodded agreement. My father doesn't understand mercy, only power. Elara thought about it, about justice and revenge and the fine line between them, about all the people who'd suffered because powerful men like Lord Vale thought they were untouchable. Do it, she said finally. End this. Ronan nodded. He turned to Marcus. Get me a meeting with Lord Vale tomorrow morning, private. What are you going to do? I'm going to give him a choice. Ronan's smile was cold. Accept his daughter's verdict, drop all charges and lawsuits against our witnesses, retire from public life quietly, or I release these documents to every newspaper and magistrate in England. He'll never agree. He will, because the alternative is losing everything, reputation, fortune, freedom, and men like Vale are cowards at heart. They only fight when they think they can win. The meeting was set for the next morning at a neutral location, a lawyer's office in the city. Elara wasn't supposed to attend, but she went anyway, hiding in an adjoining room where she could hear through the thin walls. Lord Vale arrived with 2 lawyers. Ronan came alone. What is the meaning of this? Vale demanded. I don't take orders from disgraced dukes. You're going to want to see this first. Ronan's voice was calm. She heard paper rustling. Go ahead, read it. Silence. Then Vale's voice, low and furious. Where did you get this? Does it matter? What matters is I have it, and I will use it unless you agree to my terms. This is extortion. This is justice. Ronan's voice hardened. You tried to destroy innocent people to protect your guilty daughter. You're threatening witnesses with lawsuits to reverse a legitimate verdict. You think your title and money put you above the law. I am above the law. Not anymore. Paper shuffled. Here are my terms. You accept the verdict against Serafina. You drop all charges and lawsuits against every witness in the trial. You make a public statement supporting the court's decision, and you retire from all public positions and charitable boards within 6 months. Absolutely not. Then I'll see you in the newspapers tomorrow. Footsteps, like Ronan was leaving. Wait! Vale's voice cracked. You can't. This will destroy my family. Your daughter destroyed families. Your wife helped cover it up. You enabled it all and then tried to use your power to escape consequences. Ronan's voice was ice. Consider this mercy. I could have you arrested. Instead, I'm giving you a quiet exit. More silence, long and painful. Then, quietly, how do I know you won't release the documents anyway? You don't. You have to trust me. A pause. Which is ironic, considering. I need time to think. You have until noon. After that, the offer expires and the documents go public. Ronan left. Vale stayed behind, and Elara could hear him arguing with his lawyers in hissed whispers. At 11:45, a messenger arrived at Marcus's house with a signed agreement. Lord Vale had accepted every term. It was over. Actually, truly over. Elara sat in the drawing room holding the agreement, unable to quite believe it. We won. You won, Josephine corrected. You and every other person that monster hurt. Catherine was crying quietly. Amelia looked stunned. Thomas just kept laughing, high and slightly hysterical. What happens now? Amelia asked. Now you live. Elara reached for her hand. Whatever life you want, free from your family. I don't know how to do that. None of us do, but we'll figure it out together. The door opened. Ronan stood there, looking uncertain. May I come in? Elara nodded. He entered slowly, like approaching a wild animal. I wanted to say goodbye. I'm leaving London. Going back to Cornwall, actually. I bought a property there, small fishing village. I'm going to... He stopped, seeming to realize how pathetic it sounded. I'm going to try to be useful. Ronan, Elara started, I don't expect anything from you. I don't expect forgiveness, or gratitude, or even acknowledgement. His voice was steady despite the pain in his eyes. I just needed you to know that you were right about everything, and I'm sorry for all of it. He turned to leave. Wait. Ronan stopped. Elara stood, walking toward him slowly. Thank you. For the evidence, for confronting Vale, for... Her voice caught. For trying. It doesn't make up for what I did. No, but it's something. She was close enough now to see the exhaustion in his face, the gray threaded through his hair that hadn't been there before. Maybe someday it could be enough. Hope flared in his eyes, then died. Don't say that unless you mean it. I don't know if I mean it. I don't know what I feel except tired and angry and confused. Elara met his gaze. But I know I don't want you to disappear again, even if we can never be what we were. She struggled for words. I'd like to know the man you're trying to become. Elara. Her name was almost a prayer. Don't. She stepped back. Don't read more into this than what it is. I'm not ready to forgive. I'm not ready for anything except... The window shattered. Glass exploded inward. Someone screamed, and then something rolled across the floor, smoking and hissing. Bomb! Marcus yelled. Everyone out! Chaos erupted. People running, shouting. Ronan grabbed Elara, pulling her toward the door. But more windows were breaking, more objects flying through. Not bombs. Bottles. Burning bottles. Fire. The curtains caught first, flames racing up the fabric. Then the rug. The furniture. Within seconds, the room was an inferno. The back stairs! Josephine shouted, pulling Catherine. They ran through smoke and flames, coughing, choking. Elara's eyes streamed. She could barely see. Ronan's hand in hers was the only thing keeping her grounded. They made it to the back of the house, down the servants' stairs, out into the alley, collapsed on the cobblestones, gasping for air. Is everyone... Marcus counted heads. Where's Thomas? Elara's blood turned to ice. He was in the study. He said he was getting more wine. I'll get him. Marcus started back toward the house. You can't! The flames were everywhere now, consuming the townhouse like kindling. Marcus, it's suicide! But he was already running. Ronan swore and followed. No! Elara screamed. Don't! An explosion ripped through the house. The force of it knocked Elara off her feet. When she looked up, half the building was gone. Just flames and smoke and destruction. And somewhere in that inferno were Marcus, Thomas, and Ronan. Elara was screaming. She didn't realize it until Josephine grabbed her shoulders, shaking hard. Stop! You can't go in there! They're inside! Elara fought against her aunt's grip, trying to run back toward the burning building. Thomas is in there. Marcus, Ronan, and you'll die if you go in. Josephine's voice was sharp enough to cut through the panic. Look at it. The whole place is coming down. She was right. The townhouse was collapsing, flames shooting through what remained of the roof. Heat rolled off it in waves that made breathing painful even from across the alley. Catherine pulled Amelia away from the inferno, both of them coughing violently. Wright was shouting for help, trying to flag down anyone on the street, but it was past midnight in a quiet neighborhood. No one was coming. Then, through the smoke and chaos, a figure stumbled out of the side entrance. Marcus. His face was black with soot, his clothes smoking. He was dragging someone, Thomas, unconscious or worse, blood streaming from a gash on his head. Help! Marcus's voice was raw. Someone help! Elara ran to them, dropping to her knees beside her brother. Thomas! Thomas! Wake up! He didn't move, didn't open his eyes. But he was breathing. She could see his chest rising and falling shallowly. Where's Ronan? She demanded, looking up at Marcus. Marcus's face twisted with something between grief and guilt. He went deeper, to make sure no one else was trapped. I tried to follow, but the ceiling... He gestured helplessly at the collapsing structure. I couldn't reach him. No. The word came out flat, final. No, he can't be... Another explosion, this one smaller but closer. The side wall where Marcus had emerged began to crumble. And then, like something from a nightmare, Ronan appeared in the gap. He was carrying someone. Peter Wright, who must have gone back inside looking for documents. Ronan's coat was on fire. His left arm hung at a wrong angle. But he kept moving, stumbling through debris and flames, until he cleared the entrance. Then he collapsed. Elara reached him first, beating out the flames on his coat with her bare hands. Ronan, can you hear me? His eyes opened, unfocused, confused. Everyone's out. You got everyone out. Elara's voice cracked. You stupid, reckless. Good. His eyes drifted closed. That's good. Don't you dare! She shook him, terrified. Don't you dare die after everything. Ronan! Not dying. His words were slurred. Just tired. Behind them, the townhouse gave one final groan and collapsed completely. The force of it sent ash and sparks raining down on the alley. If they'd been inside even 30 seconds longer. Elara didn't let herself finish that thought. Help finally arrived. Neighbors woken by the explosions, a night watch making rounds, someone who'd gone for a doctor. They were moved away from the burning wreckage. Thomas and Ronan carried into a nearby house whose owner was too shocked to protest. The doctor came, an older man with steady hands who examined both injured men with quiet efficiency. Your brother has a concussion, he told Elara. He'll need rest and watching, but he should recover. The Duke, however, he paused. Broken arm, broken ribs, extensive burns, and possible lung damage from smoke inhalation. He needs immediate care. Then give it to him. Elara heard the desperation in her own voice and didn't care. I'm doing what I can, miss. But he needs a hospital, proper surgeons. They got him to St. Bartholomew's by hiring a carriage and bribing the driver to go fast. Elara sat beside Ronan the entire way, holding his uninjured hand, watching his chest rise and fall with each labored breath. He'd run into a burning building for her brother, for people who'd helped her, for her. The man who'd thrown her out without a second thought had risked his life to save the people she loved. Elara didn't know what to do with that information, didn't know how to reconcile the Duke who'd destroyed her with the man bleeding on the carriage seat. At the hospital, they took him away. Elara tried to follow, but a stern nurse blocked her path. Family only. I'm his wife. The nurse looked skeptical. Elara was covered in soot and ash, her dress torn, her hair wild. She probably looked like a madwoman. Please, Elara said quietly. I'm the Duchess of Thornfield, and that's my husband. Let me see him. Something in her voice must have convinced the nurse. She stepped aside. Elara sat in a hard chair outside the surgery room for 3 hours while doctors worked. Josephine brought her tea she didn't drink. Catherine offered quiet comfort. Marcus paced like a caged animal, blaming himself for the whole disaster. This was my house, he kept saying. My responsibility. I should have had better security, should have anticipated. How? Elara interrupted. How could you anticipate someone burning down your house? Because this isn't random. Marcus's voice was hollow. This is the Veils. It has to be. We humiliated them publicly, destroyed their daughter, blackmailed Lord Vale into submission. Did we really think they'd just accept that? Wright, who'd suffered minor burns but was otherwise fine, nodded grimly. He's right. This is retaliation. But Vale signed the agreement, Catherine protested. He accepted the terms. He accepted because he had no choice. That doesn't mean he's given up. Wright pulled out the signed document. Somehow he'd grabbed it before fleeing the fire. He's just changed tactics. From legal warfare to actual warfare, Josephine said dryly. How medieval. What do we do? Amelia looked terrified. If they're willing to burn buildings, to kill people, we fight back. Elara stood, her decision crystallizing. But smarter this time. No more playing by rules they ignore. What are you suggesting? Marcus asked. I'm suggesting we stop defending and start attacking. Elara's voice was cold. Vale came after us. He tried to murder us. That's not just violating an agreement, it's attempted murder. We use that. We have no proof it was him, Wright pointed out. Then we get proof. Elara looked at each of them in turn. We find whoever set those fires. We make them testify. And we destroy Lord Vale the same way he tried to destroy us. That could take weeks, months. Marcus shook his head. And in the meantime, he could strike again. Not if we strike first. Everyone stared at her. You want to go after him? Josephine's eyes gleamed with something that looked like pride. How? We release the documents anyway. Every crime, every bribe, every illegal dealing. Elara's hands clenched into fists. Ronan gave us the ammunition. We just have to pull the trigger. He'll know it came from us, Wright warned. Good. Let him know. Elara's voice shook with fury. Let him understand that trying to kill us was the worst mistake of his life. The Duchess of Thornfield has teeth, Josephine murmured. I like it. Wright hesitated, then nodded slowly. I know a few newspaper editors, men who aren't on Vale's payroll. If we give them the story with documentation, do it. Tonight. Tomorrow morning. I want every paper in London running the story. What about Ronan? Catherine asked quietly. Shouldn't we wait until he's well enough to... Ronan gave us these documents to use, so we use them. Elara's jaw set. He'd want us to fight back. The surgery took 4 hours. When the doctor finally emerged, his apron was bloody and his expression exhausted. Elara stood so fast she nearly knocked over her chair. He'll live, the doctor said, and Elara's knees nearly gave out with relief. The arm was badly broken, but I've said it. The ribs will heal with time. The burns are serious, but not life-threatening. His lungs took damage from the smoke, which is the real concern. The next few days will be critical. Can I see him? He's unconscious, likely will be for some time, but... The doctor gestured down the hallway. Room 7. Try not to disturb him. Elara found the room. Found Ronan pale and still in the narrow hospital bed, bandages covering his left arm and parts of his chest, breathing with a wheeze that sounded painful even in sleep. She sat beside him, taking his uninjured hand carefully. You absolute fool, she whispered. Running into burning buildings, what were you trying to prove? He didn't answer, of course, just kept breathing in that labored rhythm that made her chest ache. I'm going to destroy them, she continued, needing to say it out loud. Vale and his entire family, for what they did to you, to Marcus, to all of us. They wanted war. They're going to get it. Still nothing, but his fingers twitched in hers, just slightly, like maybe some part of him could hear. Elara sat with him until dawn, watching the sun rise through the window, planning her attack. Wright worked fast. By noon the next day, copies of Lord Vale's incriminating documents were in the hands of 5 different newspapers. By evening, the story was everywhere, on every corner, in every club, spreading through London like the fire that had nearly killed them. The headlines were brutal. Lord Vale's secret crimes exposed. Embezzlement, bribery, and corruption in the nobility. Vale family scandal deeper than anyone imagined. The articles laid it all out in damning detail. The stolen charity funds, the illegal gambling operations, the bribed judges, financial records that showed a pattern of crime spanning 15 years. By the following morning, magistrates were at Vale's door with warrants. Elara read the reports while sitting at Ronan's bedside. He'd woken briefly the day before, confused and in pain, before the laudanum pulled him back under. The doctor said that was normal, that he needed rest. "Listen to this," she told his sleeping form, reading from the paper. "Lord Vale was taken into custody this morning on charges of embezzlement and fraud. His wife has fled to the continent. Their assets have been frozen pending investigation." She set down the paper, looking at Ronan's face. The bruises were starting to fade to yellow-green. The swelling around his eyes had gone down. He looked more human and less like death. "We won," she said softly. "Again. Properly this time. Vale's going to prison. His name is ruined. And you," her voice caught, "you saved my brother. You saved Peter. You almost died doing it." His hand moved in hers, just barely, but she felt it. "I don't know what to do with you," she admitted. "I'm still angry, still hurt, but I can't watch you sleep and pretend I don't care if you wake up. So what does that make me?" "Human?" a rough voice answered. Elara's head snapped up. Ronan's eyes were open, bloodshot and exhausted, but conscious. "You're awake." "Apparently." He winced. "How long was I out?" 2 days. The doctor said you needed rest." "Feel like I got trampled by horses." Ronan tried to shift position and immediately regretted it, hissing through his teeth. "What happened? After the fire?" Elara told him. About Vale's arrest, the newspaper scandal, the frozen assets, about Thomas recovering from his concussion, about Marcus dealing with insurance investigators who wanted to know why his house had been firebombed. "So it's over," Ronan said quietly. "Actually over this time. Vale will stand trial, probably be convicted. His family is destroyed." Elara paused. "Serafina's sentencing is next week. The judge is expected to give her 10 years. Good. You almost died saving people who helped me." Ronan met her eyes. "I did what anyone would do." "No, you did what you should have done months ago, trusted that I was worth saving." Elara's throat was tight. "You believed in me when it mattered most, even if it was too late." "It's not too late." Ronan's voice was rough with emotion. "Is it?" Elara didn't answer. She couldn't, because she honestly didn't know. Thomas recovered quickly once he woke up properly. Within a week, he was restless and complaining, which the doctor said was a good sign. Marcus's townhouse was a total loss, but the investigation confirmed it had been arson, bottles filled with lamp oil and pitch, thrown through windows by hired thugs who'd already fled London. 2 of the thugs were caught trying to board a ship to France. Under questioning, they admitted being hired by someone working for Lord Vale. That was enough to add attempted murder charges to Vale's growing list of crimes. His trial was set for 2 weeks after Serafina's sentencing. Serafina got 12 years. The judge called her crimes premeditated, callous, and utterly devoid of human compassion. She'd shown no remorse even at sentencing, standing silent and cold while the judgment was read. Elara attended the sentencing, sat in the gallery and watched the woman who'd destroyed her life being led away in chains. She'd expected to feel triumphant, vindicated. Instead, she just felt tired. "Is it wrong that I don't enjoy this?" she asked Catherine afterward. "No. It means you're not like her." Catherine squeezed her hand. "We wanted justice, not revenge. Justice doesn't always feel good." Lord Vale's trial was quicker. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records, testimony from former business partners, statements from the thugs who'd set the fire. He was convicted on 14 counts of fraud, embezzlement, bribery, and attempted murder. 25 years, he'd be an old man when he was released, if he survived that long. The Vale family collapsed completely. Their properties were seized to repay stolen funds. Their title was stripped. Their name became synonymous with corruption and crime. Amelia was the only one who escaped unscathed. She'd testified against both her father and sister, providing insider knowledge of their crimes. The courts ruled she'd been a victim herself and deserved none of the punishment. "What will you do now?" Elara asked her one afternoon at Marcus's new lodgings. Amelia smiled, a real smile, the first Elara had seen from her. "I'm going to Scotland, to find the man I was supposed to marry, if he'll still have me. And if he won't, then I'll build a life anyway, without my family's money or name, just me, figuring out who I am when I'm not a Vale anymore." Amelia's eyes were bright. "You showed me that was possible. I didn't—" "You did. You lost everything and rebuilt. Fought back when fighting seemed impossible. You're the bravest person I know." Elara didn't feel brave. She felt exhausted and uncertain and still nursing wounds that hadn't quite healed. But she hugged Amelia tight and wished her luck. Ronan spent 3 weeks in the hospital before the doctors cleared him to leave. His ribs were healing, his arm set in a splint that would stay for another month. The burns had scarred but weren't as bad as they could have been. His lungs were the ongoing concern. He still coughed frequently, especially at night, and the doctors warned the damage might be permanent. "You'll never breathe quite right again," the doctor told him bluntly. "No more running, probably no more riding hard. You'll tire easily, but you'll live." "I'll take it," Ronan said. Elara had visited him every day during his recovery, sat with him, talked about everything except the thing they both needed to discuss: their marriage, their future. What came next? On his last day in the hospital, Ronan finally brought it up. "I'm going back to Cornwall," he said quietly, "to the fishing village. I meant what I said about trying to be useful." "Running away again?" "No, running towards something." He met her eyes. "I'm not the Duke I was 6 months ago. I don't want to be. I want to be someone who works for what he has, who helps people because it's right, not because it benefits him." Noble sentiments. "I don't need your approval or your forgiveness." Ronan's voice was steady. "But I need you to know that I'm not asking you to come with me. I'm not asking you to be my wife again. I'm just—" He struggled for words. "I'm telling you where I'll be, in case you ever want to find me." Elara felt tears burning. "And if I never do, then I'll live with that. I'll build a life in Cornwall and think about you every single day and accept that I destroyed the best thing I'll ever have." His smile was sad. "But I'll be someone you might have been proud to know, eventually." "Ronan, don't." He held up his good hand. "Don't say anything now. You don't owe me anything. Not sympathy, not hope, nothing. I'm just asking you to remember that I'll be there, waiting, for however long it takes." He left the next morning before she could visit, just disappeared from the hospital with a note thanking the staff and a forwarding address in Cornwall that he'd left with the nurse to give to Elara. She stood in his empty room holding the address, feeling like she'd missed something important. "He really left," Marcus said from the doorway. "Apparently." "Are you going to go after him?" Elara looked at her brother-in-law, because that's what he still was, technically, since the marriage had never been annulled. "I don't know." "He loves you, genuinely, completely, stupidly loves you." "I know. And you love him. Elara stopped, took a breath. "I don't know if I can trust him again." "Then don't. Not yet." Marcus moved into the room, his expression serious. "But don't throw away something real just because it got broken. Broken things can be repaired." "What if they can't? What if we're too damaged?" "Then at least you'll know you tried." Marcus put a hand on her shoulder. "You fought for justice, for truth, for people who couldn't fight for themselves. Fight for your own happiness the same way." Elara spent a week thinking about it, a week helping Thomas recover, saying goodbye to Catherine, who was returning to her family with her reputation restored, watching Amelia leave for Scotland with hope in her eyes. A week reading the address Ronan had left, a fishing village called Polmare, small, remote, the kind of place where a duke could disappear and become just another person. Josephine found her staring at a map of Cornwall one evening. "You're going," she said, not a question. "I don't know." "Yes, you do. You're just scared." "Of course I'm scared." Elara threw up her hands. What if I go there and it's terrible? What if he hasn't changed? What if I can't forgive him and we're both miserable? Bitseti kopo krishashi kriem. What if you don't go and spend the rest of your life wondering? Josephine lit a cigarette. Look, girl, I've made a lot of choices in my life, some good, some bad. The ones I regret aren't the risks I took. They're the risks I didn't take because I was too afraid. What if it's not enough? His evidence, his help, the fact that he almost died? What if I still can't get past what he did? Then you leave. You walk away knowing you tried, but at least give it a chance. Josephine's expression softened. You've been through hell. You fought and won against people who tried to destroy you. Don't let fear win now. Elara packed the next morning. Not much. A few dresses, some books, enough for a visit. Not a permanent move, just exploring options. Thomas insisted on coming with her, at least to the village. You're not traveling alone after everything that's happened. Vale might be in prison, but the world is still dangerous. They took the coach to Cornwall. 3 days of traveling, watching the landscape change from city to countryside to the wild, wind-swept coast. Elara's stomach twisted tighter with every mile. What was she doing? This was insane. Showing up unannounced to a man who'd broken her heart, hoping he'd somehow become someone worth trusting? But then she thought about Ronan running into a burning building, about months spent gathering evidence to clear her name, about the look in his eyes when he'd said he loved her. Maybe insane was exactly right. Polmiar turned out to be even smaller than she'd imagined. Maybe 50 houses clustered around a rocky harbor, fishing boats pulled up on the beach, nets drying in the sun. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone and strangers were noticed immediately. They asked at the local pub for directions. The owner, a weathered man with suspicious eyes, studied them carefully. What do you want with him? He asked. That's between us, Elara said firmly. He's a good man, helps with the boats, doesn't cause trouble. We don't need fancy London folk coming to bother him. I'm not here to bother him. Elara met the man's eyes. I'm his wife. That changed things. The owner's expression shifted from suspicious to surprised to something almost pleased. The Duchess, he said. He mentioned you, said you might come someday. He pointed up the hill. Stone cottage at the top. Can't miss it. Elara left Thomas at the pub and climbed the hill alone. Her heart was hammering so hard she thought it might burst. What would she say? What would he say? What if... The cottage was small but well kept, with a garden out front and smoke rising from the chimney. Elara stood at the gate for a long moment, gathering courage. Then she knocked. Footsteps inside. The door opened. Ronan stood there in shirt sleeves and work trousers, his broken arm still in a splint, his face showing surprise and something that looked like hope. Elara. Hello, Ronan. They stared at each other. The silence stretched. I didn't think, Ronan started. I wasn't sure, Elara said at the same time. They both stopped, almost smiled. Can I come in? Elara asked. Ronan stepped back immediately. Of course, please. The cottage interior was simple but comfortable. A main room with a fireplace, a small kitchen, a table covered with papers. Elara saw sketches, plans for a new fishing dock, designs for better nets, notes about tides and weather. You're actually doing it, she said, working with the fishermen. I told you I would. Ronan moved to the fireplace, stirring the fire awkwardly with his good hand. They don't care that I'm a duke. Here, I'm just Ronan who knows how to read tide charts and isn't completely useless with repairs. Your arm, healing, slowly. I won't have full use of it again, the doctor says, but I can manage. He finally looked at her. Why are you here? I don't know, Elara admitted. Maybe to see if you meant it. Maybe to see if you've actually changed. Maybe because I'm an idiot who can't let go. You're not an idiot. Then what am I? Ronan moved closer, carefully. Someone who deserves better than what I gave her. Someone who fought for justice and won. Someone I don't deserve but can't stop hoping for anyway. That's not an answer. Then ask me a real question. Elara took a breath. Do you love me? Actually love me? Not the idea of me or the Duchess you married, but me? Yes. No hesitation. I love the woman who refused to break even when I tried to destroy her, who built a life from nothing in Cornwall, who fought back against people with all the power. I love your strength and your stubbornness and the way you won't accept easy answers. Ronan's voice cracked. I love you so much it terrifies me. Good. You should be terrified. Elara's hands were shaking. Because I'm terrified too, of trusting you again, of being hurt again, of wanting this and having it turn into another disaster. I can't promise perfection. I'll make mistakes. I'll frustrate you. I'll probably do something stupid without thinking. Ronan took her hand carefully. But I promise I'll never stop trying, never stop choosing you, never stop believing in you, even when it's hard. That's all I wanted the first time. Elara felt tears on her cheeks. For you to believe in me when the evidence said not to. I know, and I failed. But I'm asking, begging, for a chance to not fail again. Elara looked at their joined hands, at the cottage around them, at the life Ronan had built here, away from titles and expectations. I'm not moving back to Ashvale Manor, she said. I'm not going back to being the perfect Duchess. I don't want you to. I'm not going back to being that Duke. I want to build a school for village children, teach them to read and write, give them opportunities. I'll help, however you need. I'm still angry with you. I know, and I might be angry for a long time. I'll wait. Elara pulled her hand free. Ronan's face fell. Then she reached up and cupped his face with both hands. I'm not promising anything, she said firmly. Not forgiveness, not love, not a future. But I'm willing to try, to see if we can build something real this time. Hope blazed in Ronan's eyes. That's more than I deserve. Yes, it is. Elara's smile was shaky. Don't waste it. Then she kissed him, softly, carefully, like something that might break if handled wrong. Ronan kissed her back with a gentleness that made her heart ache. No demands, no expectations, just gratitude and hope, and the beginning of something that might, eventually, become trust again. When they finally pulled apart, Elara rested her forehead against his. This doesn't fix everything, she whispered. I know. We have a lot of work to do. I know that too. But maybe, Elara's voice caught, maybe it's a start. A start is enough, Ronan said. More than enough. 3 months later, Elara stood in front of a newly built schoolhouse in Polmayar, watching village children stream through the doors. It wasn't fancy, just one large room with desks and books and a chalkboard, but it was hers. Built with money from selling some of her wedding jewelry and donations from people who'd supported her fight against the Veils. Ronan stood beside her, his arm finally out of its splint, though he still couldn't grip things properly. He'd helped with the construction, working alongside local men to raise the walls and install the roof. Ready? He asked. Terrified, Elara admitted. What if I'm terrible at teaching? Then you'll get better, same as everything else. Ronan squeezed her hand. You've got this. She did have it. The children were loud and chaotic and asked 1,000 questions, but Elara found she loved it. Loved watching their faces light up when they learned something new. Loved the challenge of explaining things in ways they could understand. At the end of the first day, a little girl with tangled hair approached shyly. Miss, are you really a duchess? Elara knelt down to the girl's level. I am, but here, just Miss Elara, your teacher. But you could be in a palace. Why are you here? Because this is where I want to be. Teaching you is more important than any palace. The girl beamed and ran off to tell her friends. Ronan was waiting outside when Elara locked up for the day. How'd it go, yes? He asked. Exhausting, wonderful, completely overwhelming. Elara leaned against him, bone-tired but happy. I think I found what I'm supposed to be doing. Teaching? Building something that lasts. Something good. She looked up at him. Something I choose, not something chosen for me. They walked home together. Home, because the cottage had become that over the past months. Elara had moved her things in gradually, testing whether she could live with him again, whether the hurt could heal. It wasn't easy. They fought sometimes, disagreed about things, had moments where the past rose up and threatened to swallow them. But they worked through it, talked instead of assuming, trusted instead of fearing. And slowly, carefully, Elara felt herself falling in love again. Not with the duke who'd courted her, not with the man who'd betrayed her, but with the person Ronan was becoming, someone who worked with his hands, who helped his neighbors, who chose kindness over pride. One evening, sitting by the fire in their cottage, Ronan pulled out a small box. "What's this?" Elara asked. "Open it." Inside was a ring, simple, silver, with a small sapphire. Nothing like the elaborate jewelry she'd worn as a duchess. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "It's a promise." Ronan took her hand carefully. "Not marriage. We're already married, technically, though we can renew vows if you want. This is a promise that I'll keep choosing you, every day, for the rest of my life." Elara looked at the ring, at Ronan's face, scarred from the fire, older and harder than when they'd first met, but with eyes that held nothing but love and hope. "You've earned this," she said softly. "Not all the way, maybe not ever completely, but enough that I can choose you back." She let him slip the ring onto her finger. That night, lying in bed with Ronan's arms around her, Elara thought about the girl she'd been 6 months ago. Broken, exiled, convinced her life was over. She'd survived. More than survived. She'd fought back, won justice, and built something new from the ashes. And now, impossibly, she'd found her way back to the man who'd destroyed her. Not because he'd begged or groveled or made grand gestures, but because he'd proven through quiet action that he'd changed. "I love you," she whispered into the dark. Ronan's arms tightened around her. "I love you too. Thank you for giving me another chance. Thank you for earning it." Outside, the wind howled off the sea. Inside, wrapped in warmth and hope and the fragile beginnings of trust, Elara finally felt at peace. Outside, the wind howled off the sea. Inside, wrapped in warmth and hope and the fragile beginnings of trust, Elara finally felt at peace. But peace, she learned over the following weeks, wasn't the absence of struggle. It was choosing to struggle together. The school grew faster than she'd anticipated. Word spread through the fishing villages along the coast. There was a place where children could learn to read, to write, to figure numbers, where the teacher didn't charge fees or turn away the poor. Within a month, Elara had 30 students crammed into the single room. Within 2 months, she had a waiting list. "We need more space," she told Ronan one evening, reviewing the names of children who wanted to attend. And another teacher, "I can't manage this alone." "Then we'll build more space, find more teachers." Ronan looked up from the fishing schedules he was studying. "What do you need?" "Money, mostly. Materials. Someone who can actually teach properly. I'm making this up as I go." "You're doing better than you think." Ronan set aside his papers. "But I might know someone who could help. Catherine wrote last week, said she was looking for purpose." Elara's heart lifted. "You think she'd come to Cornwall?" "I think she'd jump at the chance to do something meaningful. And she's educated. French, music, literature. She could teach the older children while you focus on the younger ones. Write to her tomorrow." Elara felt excitement building. "And we'll need to talk to the village about expanding the building. Maybe raise funds." "Already done." Ronan's smile was slightly smug. "I might have mentioned the need to a few fishermen. They're talking about organizing a community effort. Materials donated, labor volunteered." Elara stared at him. "When did you do this?" "Last week. I didn't want to say anything until I was sure they'd agree." "Ronan, you said you wanted to build something that lasts, something good." He reached for her hand. "Let me help you do it." The expansion began in April. Men from 3 different villages showed up with tools and timber, working in shifts between fishing runs. Women organized food for the workers. Children ran messages and fetched supplies. Catherine arrived on a rainy Tuesday, stepping off the coach with 2 trunks and a determined expression that reminded Elara of the woman who'd testified against Serafina despite being terrified. "I'm here to work," she announced. "Put me to use." She was brilliant with the older students, patient and creative in ways Elara wasn't. Together, they developed a curriculum that went beyond basic literacy, history, geography, practical mathematics for fishing and trade. Things that would actually help these children build better lives. But it was more than just teaching. The school became a hub for the community. Parents started gathering in the evenings to discuss village issues. Women formed a lending library, pooling books from various households. Someone organized a weekly market where families could trade goods. "You're changing this place," Ronan told Elara one evening as they walked home from a community meeting. "We're changing it," she corrected. "This isn't just me." "No, but you started it. You showed people that change was possible." He stopped walking, turning to face her. "Do you realize what you've done? 6 months ago, you were exiled and disgraced. Now you're building something that will outlast all of us." Elara looked back at the village, at the lights in windows and smoke rising from chimneys, at the life they'd built here. "It's not enough," she said quietly. "What do you mean?" "One school in one village isn't enough. There are children all over Cornwall, all over England, who need this." Elara's mind was racing. "We have the model. We know it works. What if we expanded?" Ronan's eyes lit with understanding. "How many schools are you thinking?" "As many as we can manage. Start with Cornwall, then spread." Elara grabbed his hand. "You have resources, connections, even if you've abandoned most of them. Use them. Help me do this properly." "You want me to go back to being the Duke?" "I want you to use the privilege you have to help people who don't have it. There's a difference." Ronan was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "I'll write to Marcus. See what can be done." The response from Marcus was immediate and enthusiastic. He'd been managing Ronan's estates in absentia, watching the accounts grow while his cousin lived in self-imposed exile. The idea of using that money for education thrilled him. "I can help fund construction," he wrote. "Find teachers, organize supplies. But you'll need to come to London eventually, show the investors and donors that this is legitimate." "I'm not going back to London," Elara said flatly when Ronan showed her the letter. "We don't have to live there. Just visit, show them what we've built here, convince them to fund more." Ronan's tone was careful. "I know it's asking a lot. It's asking me to face the people who watched me get destroyed and did nothing. Some of them, yes, but also people who supported us, who fought for justice, who want to help now." Ronan moved closer. "You don't have to do this. We can build slowly, just with what we have. But if you want to change things on a larger scale, we have to play their game," Elara finished bitterly. "I hate that you're right. We'll go together, face them together, and the moment it becomes too much, we leave." Elara thought about it, about the children who could benefit from more schools, about the communities that could be transformed the way Polmere had been. "One trip," she said. "We go to London, make our case, and come home. Agreed?" "Agreed." They traveled to London in late May, bringing Catherine and a group of students to demonstrate what they'd accomplished. Elara's stomach churned the entire journey. She hadn't been back since the fire, hadn't seen the society that had witnessed her disgrace. Marcus met them at the station, looking healthier and happier than the last time she'd seen him. "Welcome back, cousin," he said, embracing Ronan. Then he turned to Elara. "Duchess, don't call me that. You are that. Legally, socially, every way that matters." Marcus's smile was gentle. "But I'll call you Elara if you prefer." "I do prefer." He'd arranged for them to stay at a hotel rather than attempting to reclaim Ashvale Manor, which Ronan had let to tenants. The gathering he'd organized was scheduled for the following evening. Investors, philanthropists, members of parliament interested in education reform. "No pressure," Marcus said cheerfully. "Just convince a room full of rich people to fund your radical plan to educate poor children." "When you put it that way, it sounds impossible," Catherine muttered. "It is impossible," Elara agreed, "which is why we're going to do it anyway." The venue was a private club that made Elara's skin crawl with memories. Ornate furniture, crystal chandeliers, servers in livery. Everything she'd walked away from and sworn never to return to. But then she saw the people gathered. Not all of them were hostile strangers. Josephine was there, smoking in a corner and looking amused. Thomas had come up from Cornwall specifically for this. Peter Wright stood ready with documentation. And scattered through the crowd were familiar faces. People who'd testified against Serafina, families who'd been helped by the school, even a few members of society who'd quietly supported Elara throughout her ordeal. "You're not alone," Ronan whispered, his hand at her back. "Remember that." Marcus called the room to order. Elara stood at the front, her prepared speech suddenly feeling inadequate. But then she looked at the students they'd brought, at their eager faces and careful manners, at the proof of what education could do. She abandoned the speech. "6 months ago, I was nobody," she said bluntly. "A disgraced duchess, exiled and ruined. The woman standing in front of you now could have given up, could have hidden in obscurity and let the world forget her." The room was silent. "Instead, I built a school. Not because I'm noble or charitable, but because I was angry. Angry at a system that values breeding over ability. Angry at people who think education is a privilege for the wealthy. Angry at a world that throws away potential because someone had the misfortune to be born poor." She saw some faces frowning, others nodding. "The children you see here are proof that talent exists everywhere, not just in wealthy families or prestigious schools. These children are fishermen's sons and daughters. They've never had tutors or fancy books. 3 months ago, most of them couldn't read their own names." Elara gestured to a girl of about 12. "Sarah, would you read for us?" The girl stepped forward, nervous but determined. She opened a book and began reading, clearly, confidently, with expression. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. "That's what 3 months of education did," Elara said. "Imagine what we could do with proper funding, with trained teachers and real facilities. With a network of schools across England giving children like Sarah a chance they'd never have otherwise." A man in expensive clothes raised his hand. Lord something or other, Elara couldn't remember. "And why should we fund this? What's the return on investment?" "A better society," Ronan spoke up, moving to stand beside Elara. "Educated workers, reduced crime, economic growth. But if you're asking what you get personally, nothing except the knowledge that you helped children who would otherwise have no future." "Some of us don't need personal gain to want to help," a woman said sharply. "Lady Pemberton, a wealthy widow known for philanthropy. I'll fund 2 schools. Where do you need them?" Others began speaking up. A textile merchant offering materials, a retired teacher volunteering her time, a member of parliament pledging to introduce education reform legislation. Not everyone was supportive. Some grumbled about the cost, the precedent, the danger of educating people beyond their station. But the tide had turned. By the end of the evening, they had commitments for 12 new schools and enough funding to run them for 2 years. "You did it," Marcus said afterward, grinning. "You actually convinced them." "We did it," Elara corrected, looking around at all the people who'd helped. "All of us." But the real test came 3 days later. Elara and Ronan had been invited, summoned, really, to a formal dinner at one of London's grandest estates. The hostess was Lady Ashford, a powerful figure in society who could make or break reputations with a word. "We don't have to go," Ronan said when the invitation arrived. "Yes, we do." Elara studied the elegant script. "This is her acknowledging us. If we refuse, it's an insult. If we go, society officially accepts you again." Elara's hands trembled. "I'm not sure I want to be accepted by people who cast me out so easily." "Then we go and show them exactly who you are now, not the girl they destroyed, the woman who fought back and won." The dinner was as excruciating as Elara expected. Perfectly dressed people making polite conversation while examining her like an unusual specimen. Whispers behind fans, pointed questions about her quaint little school project. But Elara held her head high, answered questions with grace, refused to be diminished. Then Lady Ashford stood, calling for attention. "I'd like to make a toast," she announced, "to the Duke and Duchess of Thornfield. Their recent trials have been the subject of much discussion. Scandal, betrayal, public disgrace." She paused, and Elara's stomach dropped. And through it all, the Duchess showed remarkable courage and integrity. The room went silent. "She was accused falsely and proven innocent," Lady Ashford continued. "She faced her accusers and won justice. She took her pain and turned it into purpose, building something of value rather than collapsing into bitterness. That is the mark of true nobility. She raised her glass. To the Duchess of Thornfield, may we all show such strength in adversity. The room erupted in applause. People stood, raising their glasses, looking at Elara with something close to admiration. Elara felt tears burning, but refused to let them fall. She stood, glass in hand, and met Lady Ashford's eyes. "Thank you," she said quietly, "but I'm not the person you're describing. I'm someone who got angry and fought back, someone who had help from people braver than myself. I don't want your admiration. I want your support. For the schools, for education reform, for the children who deserve the chances I had." Lady Ashford's smile widened. "You'll have it. I'll make certain of it." Later, standing on the terrace to escape the crowd, Elara finally let herself breathe. "You were magnificent," Ronan said, joining her. "I was terrified." Magnificent and terrified. They're not mutually exclusive. He took her hand. "Are you ready to go home?" "More than ready." Elara leaned against him. "I don't belong here anymore, if I ever did." "You belong wherever you choose to be. That's what being free means." They left London 2 days later, loaded with promises of funding and support. The journey back to Cornwall felt like returning to herself after being someone else. The village greeted them with a celebration. The school expansion was complete. 2 rooms now, with space for 60 students. Catherine had organized everything perfectly in their absence. And there was news. 3 neighboring villages wanted to start their own schools, using Polmayr as a model. "It's spreading," Thomas told them, looking proud. "People are talking about what you built here, wanting the same for their communities." "Then we helped them build it," Elara said. Over the next 6 months, the network grew. Schools in 8 villages, then 12, then 20. Teachers trained and supported. Materials shared. Success stories spreading. But it wasn't easy. Some villages resisted, claiming education would make children rebellious. Some teachers struggled with the work. Some schools failed and had to close. Elara learned to accept that not everything would succeed, that some battles couldn't be won. But the overall pattern was clear. Where education took root, communities thrived. Children who learned to read got better jobs. Families who understood numbers managed money better. Villages with schools saw reduced crime and increased economic activity. "You're changing England," Josephine told her during a visit, "one village at a time." "I'm trying to change what's possible," Elara corrected. "Show that education isn't just for the wealthy." Same thing, really. In October, Elara received an unexpected letter. It was from Amelia, writing from Scotland. "I found him," she wrote, "my former fiancé. He was angry at first, angry I'd believed the lies, angry I'd let my family control me. But then I told him everything, about testifying against Serafina, about escaping, about choosing to fight back. We're engaged again, properly this time. And Elara, he wants to start a school here, like the ones you're building. He says if you could fight the veils and win, he can fight the prejudice against educating the poor. You inspired me to be brave. Now I'm inspiring others. That's what your example does." Elara read the letter to Ronan that evening, her voice breaking with emotion. "You started something bigger than schools," he said gently. "You started people believing they could fight back, could change things. I just wanted justice. You got justice, but you also built something better. Hope." That winter was harsh. Snow fell thick and heavy, isolating villages for weeks. The schools struggled to stay open. Supplies ran low. Some parents kept children home to help with work. Elara pushed through exhaustion and discouragement, traveling between villages despite the weather, organizing supply deliveries, encouraging teachers ready to give up. In January, she collapsed. Just fainted in the middle of teaching, her body finally giving out after months of relentless work. She woke in her own bed with Ronan looking terrified and a doctor examining her with a serious expression. "You're exhausted," the doctor said bluntly. "Malnourished, running yourself into the ground. Keep this up and you'll kill yourself." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're trying to save the world single-handedly and it's destroying you." The doctor closed his bag. "Rest? Real rest? Let other people carry the burden for a while. I can't just stop. You have to, Ronan interrupted, his voice shaking. Elara, I can't watch you work yourself to death. I can't lose you. Not like this. She wanted to argue, wanted to insist she was needed, that the schools would fail without her constant attention. But looking at Ronan's face, the fear and love and desperation there, she realized he was right. Okay, she whispered. Okay, I'll rest. It was the hardest thing she'd ever done, lying in bed while others managed the schools, trusting Catherine and the other teachers to handle problems, accepting that the work would continue without her constant supervision. But it did continue. The schools kept running, teachers made decisions, parents stepped up to help, and slowly, painfully, Elara learned to let go. You built something strong enough to survive without you, Ronan told her one evening as they sat by the fire. That's the real measure of success. It doesn't feel successful. It feels like failing. It's the opposite of failing. You created a system that doesn't depend on one person's sacrifice. He took her hand. You made yourself replaceable. That's brilliant. Spring came eventually. Elara recovered her strength slowly, frustrated by her body's limits, but learning to work within them. She returned to teaching, but only 3 days a week. Spent the rest of her time training other teachers, organizing resources, planning expansion rather than doing everything herself. The network continued to grow. By summer, there were 35 schools across Cornwall and Devon. By autumn, interest was spreading to other regions. Parliament took notice. The education reform bill that had been languishing for years suddenly gained traction. Members visited the schools, saw the results, returned to London as advocates. The bill passed in November. Mandatory basic education for all children, government funding for schools in poor areas, training programs for teachers, everything Elara had been fighting for, now encoded in law. You did it, Catherine said, reading the news. You actually changed the law. We did it, Elara corrected, looking at all the people who'd helped. And it's just the beginning. But one piece of unfinished business remained. In December, Elara received word that Serafina's prison sentence was being reviewed. She'd served 18 months, and her lawyers were petitioning for early release on grounds of good behavior. The news hit Elara like a physical blow. She can't get out, she said, hands shaking. Not yet. Not when... The decision isn't up to us, Ronan said gently. Then what was the point? She destroys lives and gets 18 months? That's justice? No, but it's reality. Ronan pulled her close. The question is whether you can live with it. Elara thought about it, about revenge and justice and the difference between them, about the life she'd built despite Serafina's attempts to destroy her. I don't want to see her, Elara said finally. Don't want to give her the satisfaction of knowing I still care what happens to her. You don't have to. You've moved on. Let her be the past. But Serafina had other plans. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived, forwarded through multiple addresses, eventually finding its way to Cornwall. The handwriting was familiar, precise, controlled, distinctly Serafina's. Elara almost threw it away unread, but curiosity won. Duchess, the letter began. No apology, no pretense of remorse, just cold acknowledgement. I expect you're pleased with yourself. I'm in prison while you play school teacher and rebuild your precious reputation. You won. Congratulations. But I want you to understand something. I don't regret what I did. I don't regret trying to remove you. You were an obstacle, and I eliminated obstacles. That I failed is unfortunate. That I was caught is infuriating. But the impulse itself? I'd do it again in a heartbeat. You think you're better than me, more moral. But you destroyed my entire family to get your revenge. You're not a hero. You're just someone who won. I'll be released eventually, and when I am, I'll rebuild. Maybe not to the heights I had before, but I'll survive. Just like you survived. We're not so different, you and I. We both fight for what we want. We both refuse to accept defeat. The only real difference is that society decided to forgive you and punish me. Remember that. When you're teaching your peasant children and pretending to be noble, you're just as ruthless as I am. You just have better press. Elara read the letter 3 times. Each time, her hand shook harder with anger and something else. Something that felt uncomfortably like recognition. What does it say? Ronan asked. Elara handed it to him, watched his expression darken as he read. She's wrong. Ooh, he said finally. You're nothing like her. Am I? I destroyed her family to get justice, used every weapon I had, showed no mercy. She tried to ruin you based on lies. You fought back with truth. That's the difference. Is it? Elara took the letter back, staring at Serafina's elegant script. Or am I just the victor writing the story? You gave people chances. You built instead of tore down. You helped instead of hurt. Ronan gripped her shoulders. Don't let her poison what you've accomplished. Elara thought about the schools, about children learning to read, about communities transforming, about the law that would protect future generations. You're right, she said slowly. The difference is what we built afterward. She destroyed for power. I destroyed for justice, then built something better. Exactly. Elara carried the letter to the fireplace and threw it in, watched Serafina's words curl and blacken and turn to ash. That's the last time I think about her, Elara said. She doesn't get any more of my time or energy. And she meant it. 2 years passed. The school network expanded to over 100 locations. The education law took effect nationwide. Thousands of children who would have grown up illiterate were learning to read. Elara and Ronan's marriage deepened into something neither had expected. True partnership built on trust earned rather than assumed. They fought sometimes, disagreed often, but they'd learned to talk through problems instead of running from them. Thomas found purpose managing the administrative side of the schools, discovering he had a talent for organization that his gambling days had hidden. He met a teacher from Devon, fell genuinely in love for the first time, and married quietly in a small ceremony that made Elara cry. Catherine became the network's lead educator, developing curriculum and training teachers across England. She never married, said she'd found her calling and didn't need romance to feel complete. Marcus continued managing Ronan's estates and investments, funneling profits into educational initiatives. He visited Cornwall regularly, bringing news from London and reminders of the world beyond their village. Josephine stayed in her cliffside cottage, painting and smoking and occasionally offering advice that was equal parts wisdom and sarcasm. She declared herself too old for London politics, but took great satisfaction in watching Elara transform society from a distance. And Elara herself found something she'd never expected: contentment. Not perfect happiness. Life was still hard, the work still overwhelming at times. But she'd built something real, something that would outlast her, something that gave her purpose beyond survival. On the 3rd anniversary of their reconciliation, Ronan took Elara to the cliffs above Polmear, the same cliffs where she'd first arrived in Cornwall, broken and exiled and certain her life was over. Do you remember standing here, Assisa? He asked. I remember wanting to scream into the wind, to rage at how unfair everything was. And now? Elara looked down at the village, at the school with lights in its windows, at the community that had become home, at the network that stretched across England, giving children the futures they deserved. Now I'm grateful, she said, for all of it, even the pain, because it led to this. Ronan pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside was a key, old, ornate, clearly significant. What's this? Elara asked. The key to Ashvale Manor. I'm signing the estate over to be used as a teaching college, a place to train educators for the school network. Ronan pressed the key into her hand. The place where I destroyed you will become a place that creates teachers. Seemed fitting. Elara stared at the key, overwhelmed. Ronan, it's yours. Use it however serves the mission best. He smiled. I don't need a manor. I have everything I want right here. We could have kept it, lived there. No, we couldn't. Ronan's voice was certain. That place represents everything we've moved beyond. He gestured to the village, the sea, the life they'd built. This is who we are now. Elara kissed him then, soft and grateful and full of love that had been earned through fire and struggle and choosing each other every single day. When they finally pulled apart, Ronan had one more surprise. There's something else, he said. The board of your education initiative wants to make it official. They're proposing a charter, legal standing, government recognition, protected funding. That's incredible. They want to name it after you, the Whitlock Education Foundation. No. Elara shook her head immediately. Not my name, our names, Whitlock and Ashvale. We built this together? Then that's what we'll call it. 6 months later, on a bright spring morning, the official ceremony took place. Not in London, but in Pol Mayar. In front of the first school, where it had all begun. Dignitaries came, members of parliament, educational reformers, philanthropists who'd funded the expansion, but the front rows were filled with students, children from fishing villages and farming communities, children who were learning to read, to think, to dream bigger than their circumstances had allowed. The charter was signed. The foundation made official. Speeches were given about educational access and social reform and the power of determination, but the moment that mattered most came afterward. A girl of about 8 approached Elara shyly. "Miss, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Is it true you were thrown out? That a duke said you were bad and you had nowhere to go?" Elara knelt to the girl's level. "It's true. But you didn't stay gone. You came back and made him sorry." "I came back and made a life," Elara corrected gently. Making him sorry was just a bonus. The girl considered this seriously. "My dad says girls can't do important things, that we should just get married and have babies. Do you want to do important things?" "Yes." "Then you will. It won't be easy. People will tell you no. They'll try to stop you. But if you keep fighting, keep learning, keep refusing to accept what they say is possible." Elara smiled. "You'll surprise yourself with what you can do." The girl beamed and ran off to tell her friends. Ronan appeared at Elara's side. Inspiring the next generation? Trying to. Hopefully some of them will listen. They will, because you showed them it's possible. Ronan took her hand. "Ready to go home?" Elara looked at the crowd, at the school, at the life they'd built from ashes and anger and stubborn refusal to break. "Yes," she said. "I'm ready." They walked back to their cottage together, the sun setting over the sea, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The wind carried voices from the village, children playing, adults calling them home, the everyday sounds of a community at peace. Inside their cottage, the fire was burning, dinner waiting, everything simple and imperfect and exactly right. "Do you ever regret it, Ma?" Ronan asked as they sat down to eat. "Giving up the title, the manor, the life you could have had in London?" Elara thought about it honestly, about ballrooms and servants and society's approval, about the girl she'd been who thought marrying a duke would solve all her problems. "No," she said. "That life would have made me small. This life made me strong. Even with all the pain, all the struggle. Especially because of that. I wouldn't have fought if things had been easy. Wouldn't have built anything lasting if I'd stayed comfortable." Elara reached across the table, taking his hand. "Pain made me pay attention, made me care enough to change things. I'm sorry I caused so much of that pain. I know, but we've moved past it, built something better from it." She squeezed his hand. "We're not the people we were when we married. We're better. Harder, maybe, but better." Harder and better. I'll take it. They ate in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes from years of knowing someone completely. When they finished, Ronan cleared the dishes while Elara reviewed lesson plans for the following week. Ordinary domestic tasks that would have horrified the Duchess she'd briefly been. But she wasn't that Duchess anymore. She was Elara Whitlock Ashvale, teacher and reformer, woman who'd survived betrayal and built something worth surviving for. Wife to a man who'd learned that love meant choosing someone every day, especially when it was hard. And she was exactly who she wanted to be. Later, lying in bed with Ronan's arms around her, Elara thought about the journey that had brought them here. The wedding day that had seemed like a beginning but was really an ending. The exile that had seemed like death but was actually rebirth. She'd lost everything. Reputation, security, the future she'd imagined, and in losing it, she'd found something better. Purpose. Strength. A love that was real because it had been tested and rebuilt. "What are you thinking?" Ronan asked sleepily. "That I wouldn't change anything, even the terrible parts, because they led here." Even the part where I was an idiot? Especially that part. If you'd believed me immediately, we'd never have learned what we're capable of. That's a generous interpretation. It's the truth. Elara turned to face him in the darkness. We're stronger than we would have been, more real. I'll take broken and repaired over pristine and fragile any day. Ronan kissed her forehead. I love you. The woman you've become, the fighter who wouldn't break. I love you too. The man you chose to be. The one who kept trying even when it seemed hopeless. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, they held each other close, survivors of storms who'd learned to build shelter together. And in the morning, they'd wake and keep building. Keep fighting for children who deserve chances. Keep proving that love earned through struggle was stronger than love assumed. Keep choosing each other, freely, every single day. The end was just the beginning.